the ice and fire demon god of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 201, The Elf in the Snow, The Clever Snow Fox. After a long wolf howl, Lin En stepped on the soil under his feet comfortably. He looked at Irina, who was looking at him curiously. For some reason, after seeing Irina, Lin En, who was in the form of an animagus in the form of a snow wolf, could feel a very intimate feeling from Irina. That feeling seemed to come from the closest person, making him want to get close to her. Is this Irina's magical animal affinity talent? Exclamation mark. Lin En couldn't help but sigh in his heart. I'm afraid that not only magical animals, but perhaps any animal will be attracted to Irina. Even he, in the form of an animagus, couldn't escape. Is it you, Lin En? Irina looked at the majestic snow wolf in front of her in surprise. She could only reach the neck of the snow wolf when she stood on tiptoe. Lin En nodded slightly to Irina, indicating that the snow wolf was himself. Irina couldn't help but walk forward. She reached out and stroked Zulang's soft fur. The strong body exuded heat, showing the vigor of this body. Feeling Irina's touch, Lin En suddenly had a strange feeling, and Irina's magical animal affinity made him want to rub his head against her. However, Lin En was a genuine wizard, not a real snow wolf, so it was not difficult for him to simply suppress the impulse in his heart. After adapting to his animagus form of snow wolf, Lin En shook his body, and his body was transformed again, turning back into human form. Because when Lin En transformed before, the wizard robes and other clothes on his body also turned into the lines on the snow wolf's fur. So when Lin En changed back, he was not naked, but dressed neatly. Seeing this scene, Irina, who was not far away, obviously breathed a sigh of relief. Although Irina was also from the 21st century and had an open mind, she still couldn't show her all in front of a boy, even though she had a lot of good feelings for that boy. Next, I'll protect you. Lin En bent down to pick up his wand and said to Irina. Irina nodded, and she also raised her wand, pointed the tip of the wand at her heart in the same way, and chanted the spell, Amato, Animo, Animato, Animagus. After chanting the spell, Irina pulled out the stopper of the crystal vial and drank the blood red potion in it. The same pain came from Irina's internal organs. This intense and unbearable pain made Irina fall to the ground immediately, and her body twitched again and again. Standing aside, Lin En looked at Irina struggling in pain in front of him, and a trace of pity flashed across his face. For some reason, he suddenly felt distressed. However, this kind of intense pain is the only way to become an animagus. Even Lin En could not intervene and do anything for Irina. All he could do was to pray silently for Irina in his heart. At this time, a figure gradually appeared in Irina's mind. She had suffered the torture of Tom Riddle, the soul fragment of Voldemort in the Horcrux diary, under the Cruciatus curse last year. Although the pain brought by the blood red potion was unbearable, it was a little stretched compared to the pain of the Cruciatus curse. Therefore, she adapted to the pain brought by the transformation faster than Lin En, and the figure in her mind also appeared in front of her faster and clearer. This is a petite and clever white fox with snow white fur. The thick and soft fur can adapt to the extremely cold environment. It seems to be a little snow fox born in the snowy area. This little snow fox has beautiful eyes like sapphires. The smart eyes make people sink into them. Its ears are long and sensitive, and it seems to be able to sense all the sounds in the world. Outside, Irina's body was also changing shape. Unlike Lin, Irina's body was shrinking under the animagus transformation, and finally turned into a little snow fox about the size of a cat. After completing the transformation, Irina subconsciously moved her two front paws, making a milk stepping action. She raised her head and looked in the direction of Lin with her sapphire-like eyes. The man and the fox stared at each other for a few seconds, and Irina suddenly jumped towards Lin. Lin subconsciously reached out to catch Irina. He held the little snow fox in his hand and asked softly, "Is it you, Irina?" Eyeing the little snow fox made a baby cry. Irina stood up straight and gestured with her two little paws in front of Lin. Looking at Irina's cute appearance, Lin couldn't help but rub the little snow fox's head with his other hand and rubbed Irina's chin with the side of his index finger. Feeling Lin En's intimate gesture, Irina's face in the form of a little snow fox couldn't help but blush. She seemed a little shy and buried her head in her arms. Lin En carefully put the little snow fox back on the ground. After a while, Irina returned to her human form and picked up her wand. It seems that our animagus transformation was successful, Irina said nonchalantly, and she never mentioned the fact that Lin En had rubbed her head just now. Lin sighed slightly. I didn't expect things to go so smoothly. I thought we would fail many times before we succeeded in practicing animagus. Irina nodded, thinking, by the way, did we forget something? Lin scratched his head and asked, what is it? Irina seemed to remember something, and she said desperately, I think I missed Professor Lupin's defense against the dark arts class. It's okay. Lin spread her hands. Today is the night of the full moon, and your defense against the dark arts class will probably be temporarily taught by Professor Snape. Irina was even more desperate. Isn't that even worse? If it was Professor Lupin's defense against the dark arts class, then even if she missed the class, as long as there was a suitable reason, the tolerant Professor Lupin would give her a chance to correct her mistakes. But Professor Snape was different. He would not listen to Irina's explanation. He would only deduct points from Gryffindor without hesitation. And if it was just a deduction of points, it would be fine. If Professor Snape was in a bad mood, she might even have to be put in detention. Hearing this, Lin En slapped his head and said, hearing you say that, I almost forgot that our 4th year Slytherin class will also have a defense against the dark arts class later. Chapter 202, An Ominous Sign. So, Lin and Irina quickly returned to Hogwarts Castle. When Lin stepped into the defense against the dark arts classroom with his school bag, the bell for the defense against the dark arts class for the 4th year Gryffindor and 4th year Slytherin rang. Professor Snape, who was standing in front of the podium, glanced at Lin. He didn't say much, but just asked Lin to go back to his seat. If it was a little lion from Gryffindor, he would have been severely deducted by Professor Snape. Since the 4th year wizards had already learned about werewolves, Professor Snape only pointed out the method of identifying werewolves in the name of review, and then began to talk about other defense against the dark arts knowledge. This defense against the dark arts class ended quickly, and at the dinner, Lin also learned from Irina that, because Professor Snape was in a good mood today, Irina was only deducted 10 points from the school, after being caught by Professor Snape, but was not put in solitary confinement. Very good. Everything is going well, Lin said to Irina with a smile. After the dinner, a group of little lions gathered around Irina in the Gryffindor common room. Ron gave Irina a thumbs up. You are worthy of it, Irina. You dare to skip Snape's class. So amazing. Harry was also very happy. After all, he always hated Professor Snape, who always targeted him. After learning that his big sister actually skipped the others' class and was not put in detention, he was also sincerely happy for Irina. Only Hermione looked at her with some worry and said, Irina, you didn't attend the defense against the dark arts class today, so I'm afraid you'll miss the knowledge points in this class. Irina waved her hand indifferently and said, I've heard that Professor Snape didn't teach according to the normal schedule today, but taught the werewolf course in advance, but I have already previewed the knowledge points of the werewolf chapter in advance. Ah. Hermione was a little surprised. She took out a piece of parchment from her bag. So you have already learned it by yourself. I also copied a note for you. Hearing this, Irina took the parchment from Hermione's hand and happily hugged Hermione's slender waist. It doesn't matter, your notes are much more useful than the content in the textbook. I love you so much, Hermione baby, Irina said while hugging Hermione. Hermione was soft and fragrant, which made her unable to stop. Hermione tried to push her away weakly. Although more than 2 years had passed, she was still a little overwhelmed by Irina's enthusiasm. At this time, Harry came over and said, Irina, tomorrow is our match with Hufflepuff. You will come to watch, right? Because Malfoy of the Slytherin Quidditch team claimed that he was injured and could not participate in the game because he was scratched by Buckbeak, the opponent of the Gryffindor Quidditch team tomorrow was replaced by the Hufflepuff Quidditch team. In fact, Irina has never missed Harry's game, but recently Irina often goes out with Lin, and she is elusive, which makes Harry a little worried that Irina will run away with Lin again tomorrow. Of course. Irina said so. Ron said teasingly. Of course, as long as you don't sneak out with that senior student LUOR. Hearing Ron's words, Irina couldn't help but feel ashamed and angry. She waved her fist and threatened, Ron, if you keep talking nonsense, I will let you experience the treatment of Malfoy. Hearing this, Ron hurriedly stepped back and crossed his arms in front of himself. No, big sister, I was wrong. The next day, in the morning, the storm that lasted for 2 days was still falling. In such a bad environment, the two Quidditch teams had to hold a game in this Quidditch field. After all, this was a Quidditch event welcomed by teachers and students throughout the school. Even in such bad weather, the audience seats were still full of people. On the Quidditch field, the players of the Gryffindor Quidditch team changed into bright red team robes. They walked to the center of the field with difficulty under the strong wind. On the other side, the Hufflepuff Quidditch team members in pale yellow robes also came to the center of the court. The captains of both teams, Oliver Wood and Cedric Diggory, shook hands. As Madam Hooch blew the whistle for the game, the Quidditch players of both teams kicked their brooms hard and flew into the air. In this fierce storm, in less than 5 minutes, the players of both teams were soaked, and their vision was filled with thick mist and fine rain, which made it difficult for them to see the situation of the game. Even when Oliver Wood, the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, called a timeout, Harry, the seeker of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, did not know how his team scored. Just as the two sides were about to continue the game, Hermione got in beside Harry and said to him, I have an idea, Harry. Give me the glasses, quickly. Harry's unconditional trust in Hermione made him hand the glasses to Hermione. Hermione quickly waved her wand and pointed it at Harry's glasses, waterproof and moisture-proof. Harry's glasses suddenly became clear, and the rain could not wet his glasses. The sudden change made Harry very happy. The waterproof and moisture-proof made his vision no longer affected by the rain. If there were no other variables, the Gryffindor Quidditch team would have easily won the game. You know, Harry is still very confident in his talent as a seeker. With Madam Hooch's whistle sounded again, the players of both sides took off again. At this time, under the illumination of a sudden lightning, Harry found that there was a big black dog with shaggy hair sitting in the top seat of the audience. Harry didn't know that the big black dog was his godfather Sirius Black. He thought it was the unknown he saw in the prophecy class. Now he saw this big black dog, which was his bad omen. Thinking of this, Harry's frozen hand slipped on the broom handle, and his Nimbus 2000 fell several feet. When he regained his balance, shook off the wet bangs that blocked his eyes, and looked in that direction again, he found that the big black dog had disappeared. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 203, The Rioting Dementors and the Patroness that came in and out. After a while, Harry seemed to have discovered the golden light carried by the golden snitch, and he rode the Nimbus 2000 to fly high into the sky. But at this moment, the whole sky seemed to suddenly darken, and the surrounding sounds seemed to have disappeared. The huge Quidditch field was left with only silence and coldness. The wind and rain in the sky were still as fierce as ever, but it was as if someone had muted it. The little wizards could see the mouths of other people around them opening and closing, but could not hear any sound coming from their mouths. Feeling the increasingly wrong atmosphere around them, Lin and Irina, who were in the Slytherin camp and the Gryffindor camp respectively, changed their faces. They both drew out their wands at the same time and looked towards the sky vigilantly. At least 100 Dementors in strange robes appeared in the air at the edge of the Quidditch field. These Dementors brought a depressing atmosphere and cold temperatures. Just looking at them, many little wizards felt like they were falling into an ice cave. Endless Dementors seemed to cover the entire sky, presenting a momentum of dark clouds pressing down on the city and destroying it. Feelings of cold, fear and despair appeared in the hearts of the little wizards, and all their happy emotions seemed to be stripped from their bodies in an instant. On the Quidditch field, a figure fell from the sky. It was Harry, who had fainted again under the influence of the Dementors. In the sky, those artificial beasts felt a lot of happy emotions here. They fed on happy emotions and tried to suck the happiness of these little wizards regardless of the orders of the Ministry of Magic. Seeing this scene, Lin and Irina could no longer sit still. Regardless of whether there were their friends and partners among the little wizards present, they also understood the principle that no egg would be left intact when the nest is overturned. Expecto Patronus. Lin and Irina stood up almost at the same time. Standing in two completely different directions in the audience, the two shouted out the spell of the Patronus charm at the same time. Not only Lin and Irina, but some senior little wizards who mastered the Patronus charm also stood up and waved their wands to chant the spell of the Patronus charm. Even some young wizards who had just learned the Patronus charm and could only release white mist were trying to do their part to protect everything here. Faint silver white mist spread from all directions of the audience seats, and some patronuses in different forms such as squirrels, fish, ocelots, wild dogs, etc. rose from the ground to meet the more than 100 dementors flying from the edge of the Quidditch pitch. The most dazzling among them was a silver wolf with a silver white light all over its body and a silver fox as smooth as white jade. The light emitted by these two patronuses almost illuminated the entire Quidditch pitch. But even so, the silver white light emitted by the silver wolf and silver fox was still outnumbered compared to the overwhelming dementors. Just when people thought that the two patronuses would be forced back by the dementors, the silver wolf and silver fox issued a sharp cry in the air. They actually ignored the dementors' army in front of them that was like the shadow of the destruction of the world and rushed towards the direction of the hundreds of dementors. The silver wolf and silver fox seemed to be determined to survive in the face of death. They rushed towards the dementors frantically, tore through the dementors' camp, and killed their way into them. The wolf and the fox kept shuttling back and forth among the army of hundreds of dementors. Every time they shuttled back and forth, the oppression of the dementors on the young wizards would be reduced a lot, and the bursts of black gas emitted by the army of dementors also dissipated with the blooming of the silver white light. Unfortunately, as an extremely evil man-made creature, the dementors could not be destroyed. Even the Patronus charm could only force them back, not kill them. Although the silver wolf and silver fox that killed the dementors were powerful, their power was limited. As they shuttled back and forth, the silver white light emitted from their bodies was constantly dissipating. I don't know how long it took, but the two patronuses finally couldn't bear the burden and dissipated into the air. Lin En and Irina, who were in the audience seats of the Quidditch stadium, took a step back at the same time. The backlash from the killing of the Patronus they released made them feel a little uncomfortable. The two felt that their previous happy emotions seemed to be chopped off by a sharp blade in an instant, and the magic power in their bodies also dissipated by nearly half in an instant. However, facing the physical discomfort, Lin En and Irina did not feel unhappy at all, but smiled on their faces. In the distant sky, the silver wolf and silver fox dissipated themselves at the cost of forcing the army of dementors composed of hundreds of dementors back hundreds of meters, which allowed the young wizards who were originally in a depressed state to finally recover. At this time, the dementors hundreds of meters away tried their best to finally kill the two patronus that had been constantly frustrating their own camp. They let out a series of shrill screams, and they wanted to return to the Quidditch stadium in anger, to devour the happiness of those young wizards. But at this moment, a dazzling silver white light that was thousands of times brighter than before bloomed in the Quidditch field. This silver white light illuminated the dark sky into a daylight. No one saw the shape of the physical patronus that emitted such a dazzling silver white light. People only saw those damn dementors retreating rapidly, as if they had seen something terrible, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. When the silver white light dissipated, people immediately turned around and saw their headmaster Albus Dumbledore slowly retracting his wand, and his face seemed to be a little angry. After Dumbledore cast a shock-absorbing spell on Harry and let Harry fall to the ground safely, he released his patronus and expelled the dementors. At this time, someone asked, how much happiness did Dumbledore have to be in order to release such a powerful patronus? In fact, there are two factors related to the strength of the patronus: happy emotions and sufficient magic power. However, happy emotions have an upper limit, while magic power can be endless. Perhaps the joy that Dumbledore injected into the Patronus charm was not much stronger than that of Lin and Irina, but his top-level magic reserve, belonging to the Demon King level wizard, was enough to allow the Patronus he summoned to cover the entire Quidditch field. At this time, Dumbledore cast his eyes on the little wizards who had previously released the Patronus to resist the Dementors. There was a bit of relief in his eyes, especially when he looked at Lin and Irina. He didn't seem to have expected that Lin and Irina could actually release such a strong Patronus. Chapter 204. Everyone says don't set flags randomly. After Dumbledore used his Patronus to repel the invading Dementors, the Quidditch game ended because Cedric, the captain of the Hufflepuff Quidditch team, caught the golden snitch. Although Cedric planned to apply for a rematch after learning that Harry was unconscious, Wood, the captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team, was open and above board and acknowledged Hufflepuff's victory. On the lawn, Harry slowly woke up. When he was unconscious before, he seemed to hear the desperate cry of a woman. However, his attention was not focused on the cry of the woman in his mind, but he asked his teammates about the situation of the game. After learning that the Gryffindor Quidditch team lost to the opponent, Harry seemed very depressed. "Harry, are you okay?" At this time, Irina and the other two came over. Harry shook his head and said, "I'm fine. By the way, where's my Nimbus 2000? Hermione hesitated and said, "It's like this. When you fell, it was blown away by the wind." Hearing this, Harry suddenly had a bad premonition in his heart. Then, what happened next? Irina spread her hands and said, "Then it hit the Homping Willow. You know, the Homping Willow has a bad temper. Look, Professor Flitwick just sent it back." As she spoke, Irina pointed to a pocket at Harry's feet. Harry opened the pocket tremblingly and saw dozens of broken wood chips and twigs falling on the ground. This was Harry's Nimbus 2000 flying broom. "I told you, don't set flags casually." Irina patted Harry's shoulder sympathetically. Harry looked at Irina inexplicably. It was obvious that he had forgotten the flag he set 2 years ago, saying that if the troll was not put in by Professor Snape, his Nimbus 2000 would be broken by the Homping Willow. There is no doubt that Harry's flag worked. At this time, Harry was already in the depression of his broom being broken. In the next defense against the Dark Arts class that the third-year Gryffindors and Slytherins had after the Quidditch game, the little wizards were happy to learn that Professor Lupin was back to teach. And after learning that Professor Lupin exempted them from the homework assigned by Professor Snape in the previous class, their happiness was even more joyful. In class, Professor Lupin showed everyone a Hinkley Punk trapped in a glass box. It was a small one-legged creature. Although it looked like it was made up of wisps of smoke, it seemed quite fragile and non-threatening. But the Hinkley Punk was a real dark creature that would lead travelers into the quagmire, and the lantern in its hand was a tool to lead people into the quagmire, its killing weapon. After the bell rang, the little wizards left one after another, and Harry was stopped by Professor Lupin. "Wait a minute, Harry," Professor Lupin called him. "I want to talk to you." Harry turned back, and Irina, who was about to leave, stopped involuntarily and listened to the conversation with some curiosity. She stood not far from the two of them openly, without any intention of disguising. Seeing that Irina was going to listen in, Professor Lupin just glanced at her and continued talking. Both Professor Lupin and Harry had no objection to Irina's presence. Professor Lupin thought that Irina had the right to listen in on their conversation because of her excellence, while Harry was purely because Irina was his big sister and had unreserved trust in her. "I heard about the competition," said Professor Lupin as he turned back to the podium and began to put the books into his briefcase. "I'm sorry about your broomstick. Is it possible to repair it?" "No chance," said Harry sadly. "The Homping Willow broke it into pieces." Professor Lupin sighed and said, "They planted the Homping Willow the year I arrived at Hogwarts. People used to play a game of trying to touch the trunk until a boy called David Gudgeon nearly went blind in an eye. The school didn't let us go near it anymore. No broomstick could withstand it." Professor Lupin did not tell Harry that the Homping Willow was actually planted for him. Back then, Lupin, who was a werewolf, was allowed by Dumbledore to go to Hogwarts to study. in order to prevent Lupin from harming his classmates. When he transformed on the night of the full moon, they built a secret passage from Hogwarts to the Shrieking Shack and planted a homping willow at the entrance of the secret passage to prevent curious little wizards from mistakenly entering the Shrieking Shack and being accidentally injured by Lupin, who had transformed into a werewolf. Have you heard about the Dementors, too? Harry asked with difficulty. Professor Lupin glanced at him quickly. Professor Lupin said lightly, I heard about it. I don't think anyone has ever seen Professor Dumbledore so angry. They have been stirring for a while because Professor Dumbledore refused to allow these guys to enter the school. They were very annoyed. I guess they are the reason why you fell down. Yes, Harry said. Harry hesitated for a moment and blurted out a question that had been puzzling him. Why? Why do they have that effect on me? Could it be that It has nothing to do with weakness. Professor Lupin interrupted Harry before he could finish his words. Professor Lupin said flatly, as if he could see through Harry's thoughts. Professor Lupin said, the reason why Dementors affect you more than others is that you have experienced fears in your past that others have never experienced. Dementors are one of the ugliest things in the world. They haunt the darkest and filthiest places. They live in decay and despair, and they suck peace, hope, and joy out of the air around them. Even muggles can feel their presence. Although muggles can't see them, when a Dementor approaches, all the good feelings, all the happy memories will be sucked out of you. If possible, the Dementors will suck you until you are like it, soulless, full of evil, and you are left with only the worst experiences of your life. And your worst experience, Harry, is enough to make anyone fall off their broomstick. You have nothing to be ashamed of. Professor Lupin explained gently. He hoped that his old friend's child would cheer up. When they got close to me, Harry stared at Professor Lupin's desk. His throat tightened. I seemed to hear Voldemort killing my mother. Professor Lupin's arm suddenly moved, as if to grab Harry's arm, but he restrained himself, knowing that this was not the time to recognize Harry. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 205. Do you two really think of me as a professor? Exclamation mark. Both sides fell into silence. After a while, Harry asked resentfully, why do they go to the stadium? They're hungry, Lupin said calmly, and he closed his briefcase with a click. Professor Dumbledore won't let them into the school, so their source of prey has dried up. I think they can't resist the temptation of a large group of people around the Quidditch stadium. That kind of excitement, the emotions are high, they think it's a feast. Azkaban must be terrible, Harry murmured. Professor Lupin nodded gloomily and said in a cold tone, the fortress is built on an isolated island in the vast ocean, but there is no need for high walls and seawater to lock people up, because the prisoners are imprisoned in their own minds and cannot evoke a single happy thought. Most people go crazy after a few weeks there, but Sirius Black avoided them, Harry said slowly. He escaped. Professor Lupin's briefcase slipped off the table, and he quickly leaned over to catch it. Yes, he said, straightening up. Black must have found a way to resist them. I thought it was impossible. It is said that Dementors can drain the magic of wizards if they stay with them for too long. Harry suddenly said, but wizards should also have ways to resist Dementors, right? Irina and that senior student Rao can do it. At this time, Irina, who was listening, whispered, if you want to learn, I can teach you, Harry. Hearing this, Harry's eyes lit up, and he looked at Irina. Irina continued, if you are willing, meet at the edge of the Forbidden Forest tonight. Lin and I will be waiting for you there. Behind the podium, Professor Lupin looked at Harry and Irina speechlessly as they discussed sneaking out of the castle after curfew in front of him. Do you two really think of me as a professor? Exclamation mark. Of course, I think Professor Lupin is also good at the Patronus charm, right? As she said this, Irina suddenly turned her eyes to Professor Lupin. Professor Lupin forced a smile and said, yes, you can also ask me about the Patronus charm. But I think I have to wait until next semester. I have a lot of things to do before the holidays. This disease comes at a really bad time. Professor Lupin still looked very weak. Irina understood that this was a sequel of his experience after the full moon night. After getting the desired result, Harry left the classroom with satisfaction. Professor Lupin looked at Irina, who was still in the classroom, and asked, Miss Lovell, do you have any other questions? Irina's beautiful ice blue eyes looked directly into Professor Lupin's eyes, and she said softly, I think, Professor, you should know how Sirius Black escaped from Azkaban prison. Hearing this, Professor Lupin's heart moved, and he said calmly, how could I know how he escaped? Irina chuckled and said, Professor, don't deceive yourself anymore. Since you concealed the method of Sirius Black's escape from everyone, and didn't even tell Professor Dumbledore, I guess you also think he was wronged, right? Professor Lupin was silent. After a while, he asked in a hoarse voice, Miss Lovell, what else do you know? Professor, just call me Irina. Irina stroked the snow-white hair on her shoulders, and her tone was calm. Animagus. Sirius Black is an animagus. Besides, you may know someone else. After hearing Irina say animagus, Professor Lupin was just a little surprised. However, when he heard Irina say you may know each other, Professor Lupin's heart was in turmoil. Professor Lupin's eyes sank. He looked at the beautiful little witch in front of him and asked in a deep voice, Irina, how did you know? Irina smiled slightly and took out a piece of parchment from her pocket. I solemnly swear that I will do no good. Irina tapped the surface of the parchment with her magic wand, and then the shape appeared on the parchment. A line of large green characters appeared on the top of the parchment. Moony face, wormtail, padfoot and prongs, gentlemen who provide help for magic prank makers, grandly present the Marauder's map. Irina said softly, if I'm not mistaken, these 4 code names correspond to you. Peter Pettigrew, who is known as a hero, Sirius Black, and Harry's father James Potter. Professor Lupin subconsciously took a step back. He looked at the parchment in Irina's hand in surprise. Marauder's map? I didn't expect it to be in your hand. Yes, the parchment in Irina's hand was the Marauder's map. She asked for it from Lin before the class started. Before the Defense Against the Dark Arts class started, Irina had planned to confess everything to Professor Lupin. Her and Lin's plan needed to eliminate all unstable factors. Sirius Black was one, and Professor Lupin was naturally one. On Halloween, they met with Sirius Black and told him their plan, which was considered to exclude the unstable factor of Sirius Black. Today, Irina planned to eliminate the instability carried by Professor Lupin. And what she did was, of course, to tell the other party the truth and draw him into her camp. Irina said calmly, Professor, in fact, your guess is not wrong. Sirius Black is indeed innocent, and the real murderer of that incident was Peter Pettigrew, who was called a hero. Hearing this, Professor Lupin looked at Irina intently and said in a cold tone, but what evidence do you have? Don't forget that Peter Pettigrew was also one of my best friends. If you don't have any evidence, I can understand that you are slandering my friend, and he is also a martyr who gave his life to protect the magic world. Irina chuckled. She didn't say anything, but handed a newspaper to Professor Lupin. In this newspaper, a photo of the Weasley family traveling in Egypt was presented in the center of the newspaper, and the Weasley family all smiled at the camera. However, Professor Lupin's sight did not stay on the Weasley family. His attention was focused on Ron's mouse Scabbers, which was a mouse with a finger missing from its paw. Chapter 206. Lin and Irina are a match made in heaven. This is Peter Pettigrew? Professor Lupin's eyes were full of disbelief. As an old friend of several decades, how could he not recognize Peter Pettigrew's animagus form? Exclamation mark. What's more, the mouse's paw was missing a finger, which coincided with the only finger left on the street in the news. If Peter Pettigrew was not blown away by the explosive curse that night with only one finger left, but escaped at the cost of one of his own fingers, then everything made sense. After seeing this newspaper, Professor Lupin felt as if he understood everything. Professor Lupin said calmly, so, it was Peter Pettigrew who used one finger to release the explosion curse, and then put the blame on Sirius Black? In other words, the traitor who betrayed James' family was also Peter Pettigrew, and what happened that night should be that Sirius went to kill Peter Pettigrew, but was finally put on the spot by him. Seeing that Professor Lupin had almost restored the truth of the matter with just this little information, Irina couldn't help but look at Professor Lupin with new eyes. After all, not everyone has a god's perspective like Lin and Irina. Being able to analyze the whole picture of the matter as an insider, Professor Lupin can be said to be amazing. But there is one thing I don't understand, Professor Lupin said solemnly. If Sirius was really framed, then why didn't he argue for himself, but let himself be sent to Azkaban for more than 10 years? Irina whispered, maybe it's because of guilt. Hearing Irina's words, Professor Lupin remembered that it was Sirius who suggested that James change the secret keeper of the Fidelius charm of his house to Peter Pettigrew. If Sirius thought that it was his suggestion that killed James' family, and he thought that Peter Pettigrew was dead, then he might really not argue because of the guilt in his heart and end up alone in Azkaban to atone for his misjudgment of people. But now that Sirius knows that Peter Pettigrew was faking his death, it makes sense that the other party used the animagus form to escape from Azkaban and take revenge on Peter Pettigrew. Professor Lupin looked at Irina calmly and said, Irina, I think you have met Sirius, right? Irina nodded generously and admitted, yes, on the day before Halloween, Lin and I stopped Sirius at the Shrieking Shack after he broke into Hogwarts Castle at night and learned everything from him. In fact, the information Irina had previously passed on about the truth of the year was not told to her by Sirius. After all, Sirius was just beaten up by her and Lin that day and then told to cooperate with the action, and he had no chance to speak at all. But Irina couldn't tell Professor Lupin about her identity as a time traveler, so she could only put the blame on Sirius. Hearing this, Professor Lupin finally smiled. Since you all know everything and have contacted Sirius, you came to me today. I guess you need my help. Irina nodded and said, yes, in fact, we already have a plan to deal with Peter Pettigrew, and I came to see you alone, hoping that you can cooperate with our plan. Professor Lupin said curiously, tell me about your plan. A plan that can make Sirius, a proud guy, admit it must not be too bad. So Irina told Professor Lupin the plan, to use the old chemical cage to subtly kill Peter Pettigrew. This plan seems a little too evil. After learning about Lin and Irina's plan, Professor Lupin couldn't help but frown. But soon, he thought of James' family, but using evil to punish evil may be a kind of justice. Even the kind-hearted Professor Lupin approved of this plan, which shows how much Professor Lupin hated Peter Pettigrew, who betrayed James' family and caused the tragic death of the Potters. Irina said softly, we just need you to keep your original plan unchanged. Don't alert the enemy, don't destroy Lin's alchemy cage, and support us at the end of the school year. Professor Lupin hesitated for a while, but he still agreed. Okay. After getting a satisfactory reply, Irina said goodbye to Professor Lupin and left the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom. After Irina left, Professor Lupin was the only one left in the classroom. Professor Lupin looked in the direction of the classroom door, and he was silent for a long time. After an unknown amount of time, he chuckled and said to himself, they are so good, Lin and Irina. Oh, they are a perfect match made in heaven. After the invasion of Dementors during the Quidditch match, Dumbledore no longer allowed Dementors to approach Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. They could only be stationed outside the boundaries of Hogwarts. Therefore, there are no Dementors around Hogwarts Castle now. At night, Harry put on his invisibility cloak and sneaked out of Hogwarts Castle in the dark, heading towards the edge of the Forbidden Forest. At the edge of the Forbidden Forest, Harry saw Lin and Irina. Here you are, Harry. Lin came forward and spoke lightly. Harry scratched his head and said, good evening, Senior All. Lin said, just call me Lin. I heard from Irina that you want to learn the Patronus charm. Harry nodded vigorously and said firmly, yes, I want to learn this magic that can fight against Dementors. Lin laughed and said, of course. There is no one who doesn't want to have the ability to fight against Dementors. I will only explain the theoretical knowledge and casting techniques of the Patronus charm once. It depends on you whether you can remember it. Hearing this, Harry quickly perked up and looked at Lin intently. Lin En calmly talked about the essence of the Patronus charm. The Patronus is a positive force, an external manifestation of the things that Dementors rely on to survive, including happiness, hope, and people's desire to survive. But it cannot feel despair like real wizards, so Dementors can't do anything to it. The only thing Dementors can do is to use their own original power to offset the energy contained in the Patronus, just like the Dementors killed the Patronus released by Irina and me on the day of the Quidditch game. But in this case, the Dementors will also be forced back by the Patronus, so the Patronus is called the only magic that can restrain Dementors. Lin En said so. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 207. Voldemort is just a boiled egg and a two-hole socket. Unlike Irina, who had read the original book, Harry had never come into contact with the Patronus charm, so Lin had to start from what the Patronus charm was, instead of directly telling the spell and casting techniques of the Patronus charm, like he did to Irina. After an hour-long teaching session, Harry was finally able to release the silver white mist. However, he was only able to release the silver white mist, and he was still far from being able to release a complete Patronus. Seeing a thick silver white mist floating from the top of Harry's wand, Lin nodded slightly and said, "That's about it. Let's stop here tonight. Next, you can go find Professor Lupin. He may have a way to make your Patronus charm go further." Harry agreed, and he understood that Lin was talking about Professor Lupin's boggart. If he guessed correctly, the thing he feared most might be the Dementor, and when he faced the boggart alone, the boggart might transform into the appearance of the Dementor. And the Dementor is often the best material for practicing the Patronus charm. After Harry put away his wand and happily returned to the castle, Lin looked at Irina. "Why don't you teach Harry the Patronus charm yourself? I think your current Patronus charm level is probably not weaker than mine," Lin asked. Irina spread her hands and said innocently, "I feel that Harry and Ron are still wary of you. I think if you can have a teacher-student relationship, maybe he will be more willing to trust you." Hearing this, Lin smiled and shook her head, with a bit of doting in her eyes. "You know, I don't care about these, but since you want it, then do as you wish." Irina felt a strange feeling in her heart, and she tilted her head. "Oh, this is always a good thing. By the way, what are your plans next?" Lin said seriously. "If I remember correctly, according to the plot in the original book, Harry will get the Marauders map from the Weasley twins on a weekend before Christmas, and go to Hogsmeade through a secret passage, so as to eavesdrop on the professor's conversation about Sirius. But now, the Marauders map has fallen into our hands," Irina said thoughtfully. "So, Lin, do you mean to give the Marauders map to Harry?" Lin En nodded and said, "Yes, we should reduce the number of variables as much as possible, and I think the part where Harry gets the Marauders map and goes to Hogsmeade should not be omitted." Irina said, "I understand. I will transfer the Marauders map to Harry before the weekend. However, without the Marauders map, it may be much more difficult for us to grasp what happened in Hogwarts Castle." Hearing this, Lin En chuckled and saw that he flipped his left hand, and several pieces of parchment appeared in his hand. And all of these parchments showed the names of all the wizards in Hogwarts Castle and their movement trajectories. "These are all Marauders maps," Irina said in disbelief. Lin En smiled and said, "That's right. In fact, the Marauders map does not have much technical content. Its only subtlety is that it connects to the magic network of Hogwarts Castle, thereby stealing some of the authority of Hogwarts Castle. After I cracked the method of connecting the Marauders map to the magic network of Hogwarts Castle, I easily reproduced the Marauders map." As Lin En said, the Marauders map itself does not have much technical content in alchemy, otherwise Sirius, who is not deeply involved in alchemy, would not have participated in the production of this Marauders map. Leave these Marauders maps with you first. I will also bring a copy to Irving. The password to open and close this Marauders map is the same, which is Voldemort is a boiled egg with a two-hole electrical socket. Lin En handed a few Marauders maps he made to Irina and said. After hearing the passwords of the Marauders maps, Irina's mouth twitched slightly. "Aren't you afraid that Voldemort will fight you to death if he finds out?" Lin spread his hands and said cheerfully, "With such a password, even if the wizards in Voldemort's camp get the Marauders map and know the password, I don't think they dare to say it out loud." Irina wiped the non-existent cold sweat from her forehead. "Not to mention the people in Voldemort's camp. I'm afraid that most wizards dare not say out such a strange password. After all, until now, many people only dare to call Voldemort the mysterious man instead of calling him by his name." Time passed quickly. The white snow of winter fell from the sky, and Merlin also changed into thick white socks. In the Quidditch match at the end of November, the Ravenclaw Quidditch team defeated the Hufflepuff Quidditch team, giving Harry and his team hope that they might win, which made Harry and his team become more active in practicing Quidditch. Soon, there were less than 2 weeks left before the Christmas holiday. The rain that had been falling for nearly 2 months finally stopped, and the sky cleared up. The originally dark sky turned into a bright and dazzling egg white color. On this morning, the muddy lawn outside the Hogwarts castle was covered with a layer of crystal white frost, and the castle was filled with the busy atmosphere of Christmas. This weekend is the last Hogsmeade weekend before the Christmas holiday, which is the weekend when the little wizards in the 3rd grade and above can go to Hogsmeade Village for fun. Of course, except for Harry, who did not get the signature of his parents. After watching Ron and Hermione leave Hogwarts Castle, Harry walked towards the Gryffindor common room with some frustration. But at this moment, a beautiful girl like an elf in the snow blocked his way. Harry raised his head, and it was Irina who appeared in front of him. "Irina, didn't you go to Hogsmeade Village with Lin?" Harry asked. During the Hogsmeade week of this semester, Irina did not go with Ron and Hermione, but always went with Lin, which made Harry subconsciously think that Irina would always stay with Lin. Irina smiled and said, "I saw that you were bored, so I came to give you a Christmas present in advance. Come, follow me." Irina took Harry to an empty classroom. Looking at Harry's puzzled eyes, Irina took the Marauder's map out of her pocket. "This is the gift I want to give you. Tap its surface with your wand, and say, 'I solemnly swear that I will do no good.' Try it." Irina spread the Marauder's map flat on a desk, and said to Harry with a smile. Chapter 208. 3 parties gather together. Harry did as he was told, and the images on the Marauder's map seemed to open the door to a new world for him. He had never thought that there would be a magic item that could reveal the location of everyone in Hogwarts Castle, which almost meant that they had lost all their secrets in front of this Marauder's map. This Marauder's map also records several secret passages leading to Hogsmeade Village. "Don't tell Ron and Hermione that I gave it to you. Otherwise, Hermione will scold me again." Irina winked at Harry and said. After explaining how to use the Marauder's map, Irina found an excuse to slip away, leaving Harry alone in this empty classroom, fascinated by everything presented on the Marauder's map. At the corner of the corridor, Irina turned around and saw Lin, who had been waiting for a long time. Lin asked, "How is it? Has it been sent out?" Irina stuck out her tongue and nodded. "It has been sent out. I'm sure Harry won't be able to restrain himself later, and will sneak to Hogsmeade through the secret passage. After all, today is the last Hogsmeade weekend of this semester." "Okay," Lin said, "then we should set off for Hogsmeade. Don't forget the emergency owl food." What Lin was talking about was naturally the little owl named Emergency Food that she and Irina had bought before. Recently, Irina has been busy taking care of King V, Zyobeo and the little curly-winged demon in the suitcase, and Lin has been feeding the emergency food during this period. Irina looked up at the emergency food standing on Lin's shoulder, and she said guiltily, "Oh, I forgot. I will go to the suitcase tonight to open up a living area for the emergency food. Except when sending letters, let it live there at other times." Hearing the suitcase Irina mentioned, Lin thought of Newt Scamander's magical suitcase. He couldn't help but say curiously, "Can I go to your suitcase and take a look later?" "Of course." Irina smiled lightly. So, Lin and Irina left Hogwarts Castle together and walked towards Hogsmeade Village. There is a flat path connecting Hogwarts Castle and Hogsmeade Village, but Lin and Irina did not pass it many times. After all, they only took this road to Hogsmeade Village on weekends in Hogsmeade, and they sneaked through the secret passage more often. After arriving at Hogsmeade, the two bought owl food for the little owl, emergency food, food for the blow lady and the little curled winged demon, and the alchemical materials needed by Lin. After that, the two of them went to the direction of the Three Broomsticks bar. After pushing open the door of the Three Broomsticks bar, Lin and Irina could feel a warm air blowing on their faces, and they quickly found a corner to sit down. "2 cups of butterbeer, thank you," Lin said to Ms. Rosmerta behind the counter. Ms. Rosmerta came over and saw Irina, who came with Lin. She smiled and teased, "It's you, Mr. Roll. Is this lady your girlfriend?" Faced with Ms. Rosmerta's teasing, Lin just smiled and said nothing, but Irina blushed to her ears. Fortunately, Ms. Rosmerta did not stare at this point. She quickly returned to the counter and then brought 2 cups of butterbeer to Lin and Irina respectively. Have a nice date. Before leaving, Ms. Rosmerta did not forget to wink at Lin and Irina. Irina stared at the glass in front of her, rubbing her hands and whispering, "I don't drink." Lin shrugged, took a big sip of butterbeer first, and then said easily, "I don't drink much either, but this butterbeer doesn't actually contain alcohol. Just think of it as a drink with a buttery taste." Hearing this, Irina took a sip of butterbeer doubtfully. The hot butterbeer slid down Irina's throat into her abdomen, and a warm feeling immediately came from her internal organs. She smacked her lips, and could feel the faint sweetness echoing in her mouth. Irina's eyes showed some joy, and she quickly sipped the butterbeer in the glass, looking very focused. She didn't even notice Harry and the other 2 walking in from the door. However, Lin's eyes stayed on Harry and his group of 3 who came in from the door. In other words, the purpose of their coming here was actually to wait for the other party to arrive and witness the plot. Under Lin's gaze, Harry, Ron and Hermione squeezed to a small empty table between the window and a Christmas tree at the back of the bar. There was a fireplace, and the view from most seats in the bar would be blocked by the Christmas tree or the fireplace. Coincidentally, the table where Lin and Irina were sitting could avoid the obstruction of the Christmas tree and the fireplace and see the situation at Harry's table clearly. On the contrary, Harry and his group chose a corner seat and could not see Lin and Irina on the other side of the 3 broomsticks. Just as Harry, Ron and Hermione were drinking a large glass of butterbeer, the door of the 3 broomsticks was opened again. Professor McGonagall and Professor Flitwick walked into the bar with a gust of wind and snow, followed by Hagrid, who seemed to be talking to a fat man. The fat man was wearing a dark yellow-green bowler hat and a pinstriped cloak. The other party was Cornelius Fudge, the Minister of Magic. So far, the 3 parties have gathered here. After the 4 people sat down, Madame Rosmerta, wearing shiny turquoise high heels, came to their table with 4 glasses of drinks of different colors and asked, "A small glass of violet water?" "That's mine," said Professor McGonagall, who often ordered drinks here. Madame Rosmerta continued to smile and asked, "4 pints of mead?" "Thank you, Madame Rosmerta," Hagrid responded. That was his usual drink. Madame Rosmerta looked at the short Professor Flitwick and said, "A glass of soda with ice and conch cherry syrup, HMM." Professor Flitwick said, smacking his lips. "Then you have red currant rum, Minister," said Madame Rosmerta, placing the last drink in front of Fudge. "Thank you, Rosmerta, dear," Fudge said with a big laugh. "I must say, it's great to see you again. Would you like to have one too? Come and join us." "Oh, thank you very much, Minister." Madame Rosmerta smiled and declined Fudge's invitation. "Please give me a reward and monthly ticket." Chapter 209 The Farley Family's Collection of Books. "What brings you to this corner, Minister Fudge?" Madame Rosmerta asked for information. As the owner of the largest bar in Hogsmeade, Madame Rosmerta was always well informed, and most of her sources of information were naturally the drinkers who drank in the 3 broomsticks. Hearing Madame Rosmerta's words, Fudge's fat lower body twisted in the chair, and he seemed to check if anyone was eavesdropping around. Then, Fudge whispered, "What else could it be, dear, but Sirius Black? I guess you also heard what happened in Hogwarts Castle on Halloween Eve." "I heard some rumors." Madame Rosmerta nodded. Hearing this, Professor McGonagall looked at Hagrid angrily. "Did you tell everyone in the bar, Hagrid?" Apart from Hagrid, a guy who grew up drinking truth serum, she couldn't think of anyone else who would tell these scandals to outsiders. "Do you think Black is still in this area, Minister?" Madame Rosmerta asked in a low voice. Fudge said calmly, "I believe he's still there. Did you know that Dementors have searched my bar twice?" Madame Rosmerta's tone was a little sharp. "These damned ghosts scared away all my customers. This is very bad for my business, Minister." "Rosmerta, dear, I don't like them either," Fudge said with a little embarrassment, and he played his shameless specialty. "But this is a necessary precaution, and I'm very sorry for what happened to you. And you see, I just ran into a few Dementors, and they were very angry with Dumbledore because he refused to let them enter the castle grounds." Fudge tried to shift the conflict to Dumbledore. "I don't think so," Professor McGonagall said angrily. "How can we teach with those horrible things wandering around?" Yes, Professor Flitwick said with equal anger. However, they are here to protect everyone from more terrible threats. We all know what Black can do, Fudge argued. After hearing what Fudge said, Professor McGonagall, Professor Flitwick and Madame Rosmerta were silent. After a while, Madame Rosmerta said with a deep sigh, "You know, I still find it hard to believe. Of all the people who defected to the dark forces, Sirius Black was the last person I expected. I mean, I still remember what he looked like when he was in school at Hogwarts. If you told me then what he would become, I would just say that you drank too much mead. You don't know half of it, Rosmerta. Few people know the worst things he has done," Fudge said in a rough voice. Madame Rosmerta's voice was full of curiosity. "You mean, worse than killing so many innocent people?" "Of course," Fudge replied. "I can't believe it. How could it be worse? You said you remembered what he was like at Hogwarts." "Madame Rosmerta," Professor McGonagall said softly. "Do you remember who his best friend was?" "Of course I remember," Madame Rosmerta chuckled. "I've never seen them apart, have I? The few times they were here, oh, they made me laugh, like a double act, Sirius Black and James Potter. In this way, these people unknowingly brought up the possibility that Sirius Black had betrayed the Potter family." Lin's eyes moved from Fudge's idiot to Harry, and saw that the wine glass in Harry's hand fell to the ground, and his eyes seemed to become a little dull. "Tell me, is it really okay for us to keep Harry in the dark?" Irina leaned against Lin. She had already finished her butterbeer and was watching with relish as Fudge and Ms. Rosmerta sang together and told all the secrets that should not be told. Lin chuckled and looked at Irina beside him and said lightly, "Don't even mention us. If you can make Harry have a brain like Hermione, I would be willing to reveal the matter to him instead of hiding everything." Irina nodded helplessly. Although with the help of her and Hermione, Harry is now much smarter than in the original book, but Harry is still prone to acting on impulse when facing some things. Therefore, in order to prevent Harry from messing up, it is better for them to let Harry follow the original process. Just as Lin and Irina were talking in a low voice, a deafening shout came from not far away. "Despicable dirty traitor." As Hagrid shouted, the whole bar fell silent. Everyone in the bar turned their eyes to Hagrid. Irina looked in the direction of Hagrid with a speechless face. With such a big mouth around, how could she worry about the secret not being passed on? Exclamation mark. After a while, Professor McGonagall and others left the Three Broomsticks bar one after another. Not long after they left, Harry and his friends also left. Harry looked lost when he left. It was obvious that the previous conversation between Ms. Rosmerta and Fudge had dealt him a great blow. Looking at the two groups of people leaving, Lin shrugged to Irina and said, "We have also watched this farce. We should go." Irina nodded slightly, and she put down the glass of butterbeer in her hand that she had refilled and drank. "By the way, do you have anything else to do for Christmas?" Lin turned around and asked after paying the bill. Irina shook her head and said, "Nothing. I guess I'll stay in Hogwarts Castle for the holidays." Hearing this, Lin smiled and said, "How about we go out 3 days before Christmas?" Yesterday, Irving invited us to visit the Fly family and took us to visit the Fly family's collection of books. Since Irving has officially joined Lin and Irina's camp, it is meaningful for Irving to help Lin and Irina. For wizards, the collection of books in Pure Blood families is absolutely attractive. After all, the collection of books on black magic by the Roll family alone has benefited Lin and Irina a lot. Lin is looking forward to what kind of magic books the Fly family will have. The collection of books in the Fly family? But will Irving's family allow us to look through the collection of books in the Fly family? These things should be the foundation of your Pure Blood family, right? Irina said with some doubt. Lin En was willing to share the Lua family's collection of books with her because they were best friends and they came from the same hometown, which made Lin En trust Irina almost without reservation. But as for Iwin, even if he had joined their camp, this alone was not enough for him to take the initiative to provide his family's heritage. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 210. Build a small home of our own. What if the invitation for us to borrow books from the Farley family was proposed by Irving's family through Irving? Lin said with a smile. Hearing this, Irina was stunned and said, "Lin, you mean, it was actually Irving's family who invited us to borrow the books in the Farley family's collection, and their purpose may be, to win us over, or to show goodwill to us?" Lin nodded and said, "I think it should be like this. After all, the Farley family cannot be unaware of the fact that we joined forces to force back the remnant soul of Voldemort and kill the basilisk that has survived for 1,000 years. In addition, Irving signed an unbreakable oath with me and has been completely divided into my camp. Then, whether for Irving or for the future of the Farley family, his family will choose to show goodwill to us, or at least will not be our enemy." Irina suddenly realized, and she continued with Lin's words, "What's more, your all family is also one of the 28 sacred pureblood families. Instead of turning to Voldemort, who is regarded as a tyrant by the Farley family, it is better to turn to you. This way, it can be regarded as cooperation between pureblood families, and at least the Farley family can save face." "That's right," Lin said with a smile. After understanding the whole story, Irina readily agreed. "In that case, of course I'm willing to go with you. You can just call me through the two-way mirror when the time comes." Lin and Irina were walking on the path back to Hogwarts Castle while discussing things about Iwin's family. Before they knew it, they had returned to Hogwarts Castle. "By the way, Lin, do you still want to come to my suitcase?" Irina suddenly asked before parting. Lin said without hesitation, "Of course." Irina said, "Then I will go back to the dormitory to get the suitcase, and we will meet in the room of requirement later." Lin agreed. Half an hour later, Lin walked into the room of requirement. At this time, the room of requirement still looked like a meeting room, and on Lin's shoulder stood the little owl emergency food. Irina followed Lin and arrived at the room of requirement. She was carrying a simple looking suitcase in her hand. This suitcase was the magical suitcase with a small world inside that Newt had given her. Irina laid the suitcase flat on the ground and opened it. A deep tunnel entrance appeared on the suitcase. Lin took the emergency food off her shoulder and handed it to Irina, who then got into the suitcase with the emergency food. Lin followed her and got in. Unlike the small wooden shed in Newt's suitcase, Irina's suitcase was an endless grassland. After she got in, she did not plan to build a small wooden shed at the entrance like Newt did. "Look, that's the living area I renovated for King Zyrobeo and the little curled winged demon." Irina was like she was back home. She pointed to 3 areas with different scenery in the distance and pulled the corner of Lin's clothes with some excitement. Lin also looked in the direction Irina pointed with great interest. The traceless stretching spell applied to the suitcase was very sophisticated. Lin could even feel the traces of alchemy in this world. If Lin could master the alchemy skills applied in this world and combined with a powerful traceless stretching spell, he might be able to replicate a small world like the world in this box. With the existence of the sands of time, Lin might even be able to complete the missing laws of this world, making it a truly independent small world born in the real world. Irina took Lin to the area where the green girl lived. There were many trees growing here, and these trees contained magical power. They were all wood that could be used as raw materials for making wands. These trees were transplanted by Newt, otherwise Irina alone would not be able to find so many trees suitable for making wands. Bowtrickles usually appear on trees that can provide raw materials for wands, and to create a living environment for the green girl, such trees are naturally indispensable. In addition to these trees, Lin En could also see some enclosed soil at the edge of this area, and many earthworms were crawling on these soils. Obviously, these earthworms were raised by Irina for Kingva's food. After visiting King's living area, Irina took Lin En to visit Zyrobeo and the little curled winged demon's living areas in turn. Such a small world is really suitable for magical animals to live. After visiting these 3 opened up areas, Lin En couldn't help but sigh. Irina smiled and said with longing, "I don't know if there will be more magical animals living in my suitcase in the future. I'm really looking forward to it." Lin En suddenly asked, "By the way, Irina, don't you plan to build some areas for human habitation here?" Hearing this, Irina scratched her head and said, "There is no need for this." Lin En suggested, "But what if you go to some desolate mountains and uninhabited places? If there is a place for you to live in your suitcase, then you don't need to sleep in the wilderness." Hearing Lin En's words, Irina slapped her forehead. I saw a small wooden shed in Mr. Scamander's suitcase before, and I thought it was just a place for him to store his tools and stay temporarily when he entered the small world in the suitcase. I forgot that it can also provide us with a place to live when we are away from home," Irina said in annoyance. She just remembered that there was a camp bed in Newt's small wooden shed, and isn't the camp bed used for people to rest? Exclamation mark. Lin En chuckled and said, "So you plan to build some places to live? I can use alchemy to help, and it should be no problem to build a villa in a short time." Hearing Lin En's proposal, Irina's eyes rolled, and she said teasingly, "Oh, a villa seems a bit too big for me alone. Do you want to live in it too?" Seeing that Irina was so bold as to tease herself, Lin En was not to be outdone. Lin En came close to Irina and whispered in her ear, "Do you mean to build a little home for us?" Feeling the heat coming from her ears and the voice that was as enchanting as the warm sun in winter, Irina was immediately overwhelmed. "Please give me rewards and monthly tickets." Chapter 211, Ancient Farley Manor. Irina's face was completely red, and she didn't even dare to turn her head to look at Lin En beside her. Seeing that Irina was too shy to speak, Lin En gave up teasing her. "How about it? Where do you plan to build a house?" "I'll help you," Lin En said with a smile. Irina didn't say anything. She lowered her head and pointed to a lawn not far from the entrance of the small world. Seeing this, Lin En walked towards the direction Irina pointed. Lin En pulled off a canvas bag hanging from his waist and threw it into the air. Various materials were thrown out of the canvas bag, including magic soil and bronze that could be used for construction. The next moment, Lin En waved his left hand, and a ball of red flames ignited out of thin air, and those materials were thrown into the flames one by one. A huge alchemy of magic system officially began. When Lin En used magic soil to neutralize these materials, the materials that Lin En had previously thrown into the flames one by one gradually merged into one, becoming a new building material. Then, Lin En extinguished the flames and pulled out his wand and raised it slightly. The silent floating spell acted on these large amounts of new building materials. These materials that flashed with strange silver light were immediately piled up into the shape of a villa on the lawn that Irina had pointed to before. Then, a large ball of magic mud with extremely strong stickiness and fixing effect was thrown out of the canvas bag by Lin En again, and under the control of the floating spell, it hit the prototype of the small villa with a snap sound, and under the control of the spell, it drilled into the gaps of the building materials, gluing the entire small villa together, turning it from a loose, piled building materials into a real villa. Of course, this is not the end. As Lin En continued to wave his wand, pieces of furniture and decorations appeared in the small villa, and many patterns also appeared on the surface of the small villa emitting strange silver light. In this way, a small villa, that was no less than the top villas in the outside world, appeared in Irina's small world. When Irina suppressed her shyness and raised her head, she couldn't believe what was in front of her. A small villa full of poetic and picturesque scenery stood in this world, and at the back of the villa, you could see a rockery several meters high and a spring flowing from the rockery. The spring gathered in an artificial lake, and many fish moved freely in the lake. "Did you also use magic and alchemy to transform those fish?" Irina looked at Lin En in disbelief. Lin En shrugged and looked at her strangely. "What are you thinking about? These fish must have been bought. They were originally used as food for emergency food." Irina covered her face. She was really embarrassed. After the small villa was built, Lin En and Irina spent another day, that is, Sunday, to open up a small forest suitable for owls in the small world as the next home for emergency food. As for where the trees in this small forest came from, we have to ask an area in the Forbidden Forest that was hollowed out by someone. Time flies, and soon it is Christmas Eve. In the past 2 weeks, Irina found that Harry has been in a state of absent-mindedness. It is obvious that what he heard in the Three Broomsticks that day has a great impact on him. Just as Lin guessed before, Harry is still in a stage where he is easily impulsive. In just these 2 weeks, Harry has proposed to seek revenge on Sirius more than 10 times. This makes Irina glad that she did not tell Harry the truth. Otherwise, if Harry stupidly seeks revenge on Peter Pettigrew, but accidentally destroys the alchemy cage made by Lin, then they will probably have nowhere to cry if their plan is destroyed. Moreover, with Harry's kind nature, even if he catches Peter Pettigrew, he may not really kill him. What is more likely to happen is that Harry decides to use the laws of the Ministry of Magic to punish Peter Pettigrew and wants to send Peter Pettigrew to Azkaban, but Peter Pettigrew escapes halfway. After the Christmas dinner, Lin and Irina left Hogwarts Castle. They made an appointment with Irving to meet at the castle of the Fly family and spend this year's Christmas at Irving's home. After leaving the territory of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, Lin took out a broken teacup from his pocket. Obviously, this broken teacup was a door key to the residence of the Fly family. With the influence of the Fly family in the Ministry of Magic, it was not easy for Irving to obtain a legal door key. At this time, the concentration of magic power near the broken teacup in Lin's hand became more and more concentrated, which meant that the trigger time of this door key was about to come. Irina quickly reached out and grabbed the handle of the broken teacup. Soon, accompanied by a flash of white light, the bodies of the two suddenly twisted and disappeared with the broken teacup. Between the passing of time, the two appeared in a strange manner. This manor looked about the same size as the Roll Manor in Lin's home, but the decoration here was like a medieval European manor, full of ancient atmosphere everywhere. Of course, this may be because everything in this manor was built in the Middle Ages hundreds of years ago, and no one has ever made any changes to it in the past hundreds of years. After all, the appearance of Roll Manor was similar to this place before Lin En was born, but after Lin En grew up and was able to act independently, he wanted to renovate Roll Manor and Roll Castle with more modern facilities, and these modern facilities did make the lives of Lin En and Rowena much more convenient. Whether it is the current Roll Manor or the manor in front of Lin En and Irina, each has its own beauty, but the direction of beauty is different. This ancient manor made Lin En and Irina feel like they were in a history book. Lin, Irina, you are here. At this moment, a voice came from behind Lin En and Irina. The two turned around and saw Iwin wearing a formal dress, welcoming them. Next to Iwin stood a middle-aged man who was also wearing a purple dress. Hello, Mr. Fully. Lin En and Irina spoke to the middle-aged man at the same time. The middle-aged man who could appear here and make Irving beside him look at him with respect must be Irving's father, Mr. Fully, the current head of the Fully family. Chapter 212 Ancient Magic. Mr. Farley smiled at Lin and Irina and introduced himself. Hello, Mr. Roll, Miss Lowell. My name is Carol Farley, Irving's father. Welcome to Farley Manor. After Mr. Farley finished speaking, Irving came forward. Irving said to the two, my father promised to let me take you to visit Farley Manor and allow you to read the magic books in our Farley family. Solon and Irina followed Irving's footsteps and visited the huge Farley Manor. On the way to Farley Castle, Irina asked curiously, Irving, are the books in your Farley family also a large number of advanced black magic books? Hearing this, Irving, who was walking in front, turned around. He saw the expression of Lin next to Irina and realized that Irina did not know the specific situation of the pureblood family. Irving explained to Irina, no, in fact, every pureblood family has a different focus in their collections, such as the Rowell family's books on dark magic, the Weasley family's books on alchemy magic, and even Harry Potter's Potter family, which is not a pureblood family, once had some blood magic books. Hearing Irving's words, not only Irina, but also Lin was a little surprised. Although Lin knew that the collections of each pureblood family had their own focus, he was not clear about the focus of the collections of other pureblood families. After learning that the Weasley family's collection focused on alchemy magic, many things that Lin was originally confused about were now explained. The so-called alchemy magic is the combination of alchemy and magic, and the flying car modified by Mr. Weasley is a typical product of alchemy magic. If the Weasley family owns a large number of books on alchemy, then it is not surprising that Mr. Weasley is proficient in alchemy and the future Weasley twins can invent so many novel alchemy products. After all, the only way to enable a wizard who has never systematically studied alchemy to have the ability to use alchemy to transform things is alchemy. So, what does the Fry family's collection of books focus on? Lin asked softly. Iwin looked at Lin. He smiled proudly and heard him say word by word, ancient magic. Hearing this, Lin and Irina were both shocked. Ancient magic basically has extremely powerful power. A powerful ancient magic can even destroy a city in an instant. Even many of the powerful magics that wizards are familiar with now are simplified versions of those ancient magics. There are many ancient magics recorded in the magic books of our Fury family, and the way to record ancient magic in the books is not to let us learn a new magic system from scratch, but to reverse it. Irving said so. Reverse? Irina looked at him with some doubts. Irving nodded and said affirmatively, yes, reverse. As we all know, many powerful magics, including the fire spell, are simplified from some ancient magics, and what we have to do is to reverse these simplified magics and restore them to the original ancient magic. Lin En asked, but if these existing magics can really be reversed to ancient magic, then why has no one in the Fury family used ancient magic in the past 100 years? Hearing this, Irving smiled bitterly and said, this method of reversely deriving ancient magic is easier than learning ancient magic from scratch, but its threshold is too high. It is so high that no one in our Fury family is qualified to practice ancient magic in the past few hundred years. Why do you think so? Lin En asked. Iwin explained. The prerequisite for practicing an ancient magic is that the wizard can practice the simplified contemporary magic to an extremely proficient level, and this level requires the wizard to be able to complete the silent and wandless casting of the spell very smoothly. For example, an ancient magic called Thunderfall requires the wizard who practices it to be able to perform the silent and wandless casting of the weather spell. This is not enough. Performing the silent and wandless casting of the weather spell through gestures cannot meet its requirements. It requires you to release the weather spell with a thought without any action. Iwin said so. Hearing Iwin's words, Lin En and Irina both fell into silence. The prerequisite for practicing ancient magic is simply too difficult, which is almost impossible for ordinary wizards to do. It is no wonder that no one in the Fry family has been able to practice ancient magic for hundreds of years. With this threshold, I'm afraid that the number of people who are qualified to practice it in the entire magic world for hundreds of years is less than a handful. I think maybe we can try. After a long time, Lin En spoke out. With Lin En's affinity for fire and Irina's affinity for ice, they had already been able to cast the fire spell and the freezing spell silently and without a wand. Irina could even use her talent to transform the freezing spell, which was a single target attack spell, into a spell that caused range damage, such as the ice field. Perhaps, Irina's process of deriving the freezing spell into the ice field could be considered as what Irving called reverse deduction. Lin En stood there without any movement, but a ball of red flame rose up out of thin air in front of him, and then landed on Lin En's palm. This, or thought, can release the fire spell. It's worthy of Lin En, who forced back the residual soul of the mysterious man, and killed the snake monster that had lived for 1,000 years. Irving said in shock, his face full of disbelief. Seeing Lin En casting a spell beside her, Irina lowered her head and pondered for a while, and then, as her thought rose, 5 ice cones condensed out of thin air in front of her and rotated around her body. These 5 ice cones were naturally evolved from the freezing spell. As she was ahead of Lin En in deducing magic, it was not difficult for her to meet the requirements of practicing ancient magic. At this time, Irving was so surprised that he could not speak. He thought that the main purpose of today was just to take Lin En and Irina to visit his collection of books and show his sincerity. But he did not expect that Lin En and Irina actually met the prerequisites for practicing ancient magic, which was far beyond his expectations. However, for Irving, letting Lin En and Irina learn his own ancient magic was not a loss. After all, they have long been comrades in arms, aren't they? Exclamation mark. Chapter 213, Purgatory Demon Puppet. After learning that Lin and Irina had reached the threshold to practice ancient magic, Iwin had no intention of taking them to continue to visit the manor. Iwin seemed to want to verify whether Lin and Irina could release the ancient magic that no one in the Farley family had been able to use for hundreds of years. He took Lin and Irina directly to the direction of Farley Castle. When the three arrived at Farley Castle, Mr. Farley was still resting in the living room on the first floor. After seeing the 3 people coming, Mr. Farley asked with some surprise, "Have you finished visiting Farley Manor?" Iwin took a step forward and explained, "That's right, Father. Lin and Irina told me that they have reached the threshold to practice ancient magic." Hearing this, Mr. Farley was stunned and said, "Iwin, are you serious? You know, the people in front of him are all 3rd and 4th grade wizards." Even those elite auras may not be able to cast spells silently and without wands, let alone underage wizards who can't even cast some basic little magic! Exclamation mark. Even though Lin and Irina had the experience of repelling Voldemort's remnant and killing the basilisk, Mr. Farley was unwilling to believe that they could release magic in a single thought. After all, they were only 13 or 14 years old. Seeing that Mr. Farley did not believe it, Irving did not refute it, but cast his eyes on Lin and Irina. Feeling Irving's gaze, the two naturally understood what he meant. A ball of fire the size of a basketball ignited out of thin air in front of Lin, and the red light illuminated the originally dim Farley castle, and more than a dozen dagger-sized ice cones condensed in front of Irina, flying around Irina, bringing up waves of ice mist. Snap! The sound of the teacup breaking rang out. Mr. Farley's hand holding the teacup was still frozen in the air, and he seemed to be immobilized in place, his face full of surprise. I didn't expect that you actually had such a powerful level of magic. Lin, Irina, can I call you that? Mr. Farley looked at the two with a complicated expression. Lin and Irina looked at each other and said in unison, of course, Mr. Farley. Mr. Farley didn't care at all about his identity as the patriarch of the Farley family, one of the 28 holy pureblood families. He bowed slightly to the two of them and said, I underestimated you. Now that things have come to this, I think it is an honor for the Farley family to have Iwin join you. As for the Farley family's collection of books, please feel free to look at them. After that, Mr. Farley looked at Iwin and said, Iwin, take Lin and Irina to our library. Iwin nodded, waved to Lin and Irina, and said, Lin, Irina, follow me. Iwin led the two of them towards the stairs. Unlike the Roll Castle, the books in the Farley Castle were stored on the third floor of the castle, and the entire floor was filled with all kinds of magic books. There are not many magic books in the Roll Castle, because the magic books in the Roll Castle are all about advanced magic knowledge, and some basic magic books will not be stored in the Roll Castle. This is why Lin En has not been exposed to magic since he was born, until he was 11 years old. If the Roll Castle could be like the Fly Castle, no matter how deep or shallow the magic knowledge is, it would be stored in the library, then I'm afraid that Lin En's current magic level would be even higher. After arriving at the library on the third floor, Iwin directly ignored the rows of books on the tall shelves in front of him, and took Lin En and Irina to the deepest part of the library. Soon, the two passed through the rows of bookshelves, and arrived at the end of the library. It was a cabinet made of crystal, and no more than 13 books with various strange patterns on the cover were sealed in this crystal cabinet. Seeing the magic books in the crystal cabinet, Lin En and Irina's eyes could not help but become solemn. You know, in the West, whether in the magic world or the muggle world, people always avoid the number 13 and think it is a bad omen. For example, when Western people entertain guests, they will try their best to avoid the number 13. If the number of guests has to be 13, the host will put a teddy bear on the 14th chair to act as the 14th guest. However, the magic books placed in the crystal cabinet in front of them are exactly 13. Lin En and Irina did not believe this was a coincidence. The two cast their eyes on Irving. Irving naturally understood what the two were thinking. After all, when he first came here, he had the same question in his mind. Our Fly family once had more than these 13 books that recorded ancient magic, but nearly 1,000 years ago, the Fly family experienced a war. It was a catastrophe that almost caused the Fly family to lose all its heritage. Thanks to the efforts of the patriarch of the Fly family at that time, we were able to keep these last 13 books. We regard it as a shame, so we use this unknown number to warn ourselves not to let the Fly family fall into the abyss again. Irving said in a low voice. Lin En pondered. So, this is why the Fly family chose to protect itself more than a decade ago, neither joining Voldemort's camp, nor being willing to be his enemy. Irving nodded. He didn't say anything, but walked forward alone, and opened the crystal cabinet. Irving took out the 13 books one by one and spread them flat on the ground. Lin En and Irina quickly gathered around, and looked at these books that recorded ancient magic. On the covers of these books, the names of the ancient magics recorded in them were written in ancient runes, and the thunder spell mentioned by Iwin before was also among them. In addition, Lin En and Irina also saw 10 other ancient magics, but their simplified spells were not able to be cast silently and without a wand. However, when the two saw the last 2 books, they were surprised. The ancient magic recorded in these 2 magic books happened to be the fire spell and the freezing spell after their simplified version. Lin En couldn't wait to pick up the ancient magic with the simplified version of the fire spell, and looked at the 4 big words on the cover: Purgatory Demon Puppet. This Purgatory Demon Puppet is the name of this ancient magic, and its function is to give the flame a soul, turning the flame into a soldier with independent consciousness and capable of fighting. Lin En believes that this Purgatory Demon Puppet will become an invincible blade in his hands in the future. Chapter 214 Ice Phantom God. After opening the ancient magic book called Purgatory Magic Golem, Lin En eagerly studied the knowledge in it. The principle of this ancient magic called Purgatory Magic Golem is to transform the flame compressed to the extreme into the appearance of a soldier, and endow the soldier with a soul with a wisp of special magic from hell, making him a purgatory warrior who is always loyal to the caster. As for how to obtain the special magic from purgatory, the book also records the spell to summon it. Every syllable in this spell is extremely obscure, and the difficulty of chanting the spell in a coherent way is no less than a tongue twister, like ash fertilizer evaporates and turns black. In addition, after shaping the Purgatory Magic Golem with the flame compressed to the extreme and a wisp of special magic from hell, the caster can also use the flame compressed to the extreme to transform the weapon given to the Purgatory Magic Golem according to his own preferences. This weapon can be in any form, including melee weapons such as swords, blades, axes, and even modern weapons such as firearms, but the only requirement for this weapon is that the form it transforms into does not require the use of magic power in battle. In other words, the weapon of the Purgatory Demon Golem cannot be a magic product such as a magic wand, or an alchemical product containing magical power. The Purgatory Demon Golem has a fearless fighting spirit and extremely high attack and defense attributes. The Purgatory Demon Golem is immortal and there is no way to kill it. Even if its body is smashed to pieces, it can gradually recover. The only way to make the Purgatory Demon Golem dissipate is to completely consume the magic power in the Purgatory Demon Golem's body. In other words, the enemy facing the Purgatory Demon Golem must use 100 times the magic power contained in the Purgatory Demon Golem's body to forcibly extinguish it. This method is similar to the principle of the end of all curses. This book records in detail the method of reverse engineering the flame spell into the Purgatory Demon Golem. When Lin En turned to the last page of the book, a line of words flashing with dark red light made Lin En smile with joy. The flame used to make the Purgatory Demon Golem can be any kind of flame, and the nature of different flames will also cause the relevant attributes and talents of the Purgatory Demon Golem to change accordingly. This line of dark red small words seems to be just explaining a feature of this ancient magic, but it is of extraordinary significance to Lin En. The flame used to make the Purgatory Demon Golem can be any kind of flame, which also means that Lin En can not only use the magic flame of the flame spell to make the Purgatory Demon Golem, but also the fierce fire and the Goblet Fairy Fire can also be the raw materials for making the Purgatory Demon Golem. Even the flame like the forbidden magic fire, which does not exist in the magic world, can be used to make the Purgatory Demon Golem, so that the fearless warrior from Purgatory has the power of forbidden magic. Thinking of this, Lin En couldn't help but want to try to practice this ancient magic. However, nothing can be accomplished overnight, let alone this kind of ancient magic that is extremely difficult to practice. Not to mention making a complete Purgatory Demon puppet. Just learning the obscure spell used to summon the special magic from hell will take Lin En at least a day. Although Lin En has a very high affinity for fire, the spell to summon the special magic from hell has nothing to do with fire. Therefore, Lin En can only rely on himself to learn the obscure spell. While Lin En was learning this ancient magic, Irina was also flipping through the ancient magic book that was suitable for her practice. I saw that on the cover of the book in Irina's hand, there were 4 big words written, Ice Phantom God. Yes, the name of this ancient magic is called Ice Phantom God. As Irina read, the principle of this ancient magic called Ice Phantom God gradually appeared in front of her. This ancient magic called Ice Phantom God is not so much a powerful magic as it is a cultivation method similar to the Eastern magic world. In the principle of the Ice Phantom God, the caster needs to convert the magic power in his body into the power of ice, in advance in a form similar to the freezing spell, so that he can transform into any form of ice at any time and anywhere. And this power of ice is called the power of ice in this book. The caster converts part of the magic power in his body into the power of ice in advance, and recites a more obscure spell, to store it in an area similar to the dungeon in the body, and isolate it from the magic power in the caster's body. This method of storing the power of ice in the body is somewhat similar to the method Lin En used to store the refined forbidden magic fire in the body. Both of them store a special power other than pure magic power that can be used by the caster in his body, so that the caster can use it at any time. In other words, if Irina stores the power of ice in a corner of her body, then this power of ice can be stored unlimitedly like Lin En's forbidden magic fire, and can be taken out of the body at any time for use. Even if the magic power is converted into ice power and stored in the body, it will not reduce the upper limit of the magic power, because the magic power consumed by the conversion into ice power will still recover with the passage of time, but the ice power in her body will not be reduced. This is equivalent to increasing Irina's magic reserve upper limit in disguise. Of course, the content of the ice god is far more than that, otherwise it cannot be called a powerful ancient magic. The previous process of converting magic power into ice power and storing it in the body is just a prerequisite for casting the ice god. The real function of the ice god is to allow the caster to run the ice power in the body in a specific trajectory, so that the caster can materialize and use the ice power in any form. The examples of the use of ice power recorded in this book alone are enough for Irina to study for a long time. These methods of using ice power include, but are not limited to, transforming ice power into ice armor that wraps oneself to resist the enemy's physical attack, resist, refract, and even use the smooth mirror surface of ice to rebound the enemy's magic. Or, the power of ice can be condensed into one's own body, so that the caster consumes the power of ice to complete a quick sprint, and uses the power of ice to freeze the target penetrated by oneself, which has the same effect as the freezing spell. Or, the power of ice can be transformed into weapons such as ice arrows and puppets such as moving ice giants that can fight on their own, playing the role of a mage or summoner in battle. Even releasing the power of ice through weapons such as longswords, slashing out a sword energy covered with ice mist, and freezing all enemies touched by the sword energy into ice sculptures, is only the simplest way to use the power of ice. These familiar ways of releasing the power of ice element, it is no wonder that the ancient magic of the Ice Phantom God is mistaken for the Eastern cultivation method. Chapter 215 C4 Plastic Explosive. The ice god is said to be an ancient magic, but it can derive hundreds or thousands of magics, and the most basic methods of using the power of ice alone can already be compared to many powerful spells in the magic world today. At this time, Irina also turned to the last page of the book, and when she saw the line of ice blue small words on the last page of the book, her face also showed ecstasy. The ice power transformed by the ice god has the ability to absorb other special attributes for its own use, but the ice power can only integrate one special attribute at the same time. However, ice power containing different special attributes can be stored in the same position of the caster's body at the same time, and will not conflict with each other. This ice blue small word can be said to have transformed Irina's ice element affinity talent, no longer as ordinary as before, when she could only use the freezing spell. You know, the ability to absorb ice power of other attributes means that it is no longer a pure ice element, but this impure ice element power can still be used by Irina with ease. If the power of ice can be integrated with some powerful special properties, then even if Irina does not use the methods recorded in the books to exert the power of ice alone is enough to make the enemy drink a pot. For example, the power of ice that is integrated with Lin En's alchemical attribute with the power of forbidden magic can be transformed into forbidden magic ice, which has the power to suppress the surrounding magic, and the power of ice that is integrated with the snake venom of the serpent monster can have the toxicity of snake venom and turn into a new ice poison. Thinking of this, the smile on Irina's face became more and more vigorous. She looked at Lin En, who was also smiling, and it was obvious that the ancient magic that the two could practice would have a huge bonus to them. At this time, Lin En closed the book in his hand. He looked at Iwin with an urgent look and asked, "Iwin, Can I and I borrow these 2 books for a while? If it was an ordinary magic book, Lin En and Irina could just copy the contents and study them carefully later. However, the words and the spells of these 2 magic books seemed to be alive. If they were not in the book, even if Lin En got the spells he copied, he would not be able to learn them. Hearing this, Irina hesitated for a moment, and he agreed, saying, "Okay, but there is one condition. That is, during the time you borrow these 2 books, you can only live in Folly Castle, and you cannot take them away from Folly Castle." Lin En and Irina naturally agreed to Irina's conditions. After all, Christmas has a whole week of vacation, and this time is enough for Lin En and Irina to learn the spells contained in ancient magic. As for the theoretical knowledge and casting techniques, Lin En and Irina can copy them back and study them by themselves. So, Lin En and Irina stayed in the Folly Castle. They took the 2 books, Purgatory Demon Golem and Ice Phantom God, which recorded ancient magic, back to their rooms. Folly Castle is larger than Roll Castle in scale, so the master bedroom, second bedroom and guest room of Folly Castle are all on the 2nd floor, which makes it very convenient for Lin En and Irina to go to the 3rd floor, to borrow other magic books, or go downstairs to enjoy food. In this way, Christmas came quietly. When the 2 woke up from the bed the next morning, the foot of the bed was already piled with this year's Christmas gifts. In Lin En's room, Lin En was unpacking his Christmas gifts one by one. Apart from those Christmas gifts that were no different from previous years, the only interesting ones were probably Irina and Green's Christmas gifts. Irina gave Lin En a pendant, and this pendant was formed by freezing a butterfly with ice blue wings and ice. This pendant looked very beautiful, like ice blue amber. After feeling the temperature of the magic ice, Lin En believed that, if the pendant was not melted by other special means, it would probably last for decades without melting. And if a wizard cast a freezing spell on it during this period, its storage time could be further extended. Interesting. Lin En's mouth corners could not help but slightly rise. The shape of this pendant was somewhat similar to the golden pendant sealed with a blessing potion that he gave to Irina. If the 2 were put together, people would undoubtedly think that they were couple pendants. Is this a response to him? Exclamation mark. Lin En thought so, and his smile became even bigger. However, when Lin En opened the gift that Green gave him, his smile froze. The gift box that Green gave to Lin En was the size of a large storage box, and the gift box contained an iron box. However, the iron box was filled with granules, and the instruction manual with the word C4 plastic explosive on the outside of the iron box made Lin En want to cry but could not. "No, teacher, you gave me a few MK2 grenades as self-defense weapons 2 years ago, but isn't it a bit too outrageous to give me a box of C4 plastic explosives this time?" Exclamation mark. C4 plastic explosives are a type of plastic explosives belonging to the C series of explosives, composed of explosives, plastic adhesives, plasticizers and labeling agents. The explosive equivalent of C4 plastic explosives is 1.34, and when its density is 1.59 grams per cubic centimeter, its detonation speed can reach 80-40 meters per second. However, although this explosive is powerful, it is very safe to use. Even if someone shoots directly at the explosives, it will not explode. It can only be detonated with a detonator. Under the iron box, Lin En saw an envelope that was pressed under the iron box. Lin opened the envelope, and Green's handwriting was clearly visible on the paper. "Although I don't know what kind of danger you will encounter in Hogwarts Castle this year, according to your experience in the past 2 years, you probably won't be too peaceful this year. If you encounter a powerful enemy, then both magic and alchemy will have magical fluctuations, which may make you discovered by enemies who are sensitive to magical fluctuations, but muggle weapons don't have this risk. I gave you some materials for making props to fight the enemy, and the instructions are attached." Under Green's letter, Lin really saw an instruction manual on how to use C4 plastic explosives to make explosive packs. Seeing this, Lin couldn't help but feel ashamed. "Teacher, you really worry too much. Hogwarts Castle is really safe this year. At least you don't need C4 bombs, right?" Exclamation mark. Chapter 216 A Precious Gift. Green did not mention Sirius in the letter. Of course, this was not because Green did not know about Sirius's intrusion into Hogwarts Castle. After all, this matter had long been reported in the Daily Prophet. It was just that Green did not think that Sirius had the ability to threaten Lin. You know, Lin was able to kill so many evil dark wizards in Levy Alley, and his fighting ability was obvious. And Sirius was just a small character in Green's eyes. He was not a pure dark wizard at all. He could not cause any trouble, let alone threaten Lin now. In fact, Green's idea was indeed correct. Both Lin and Irina could beat Sirius, whose magic level had declined. Teacher, I'm really safe now. Are those muggle weapons unnecessary? Lin's mouth twitched constantly as he wrote a reply to Green. On the other side, in Irina's room, she was also opening her own Christmas present. The gifts Irina received were similar to those of previous years, and the only gifts that could surprise Irina were those given by Lin and Newt Scamander. Among them, the gift Lin gave her was a strengthened anti-magic staff, and Irina could see bursts of silver light flashing on the staff. This was the first sample made by Lin after he improved the anti-magic staff. What he did was to add the power of the Sand of Time to Green's anti-magic staff. He fused a whole grain of Sand of Time into the anti-magic staff, so that the anti-magic staff had a certain time power in addition to the original power of anti-magic. The time power given to the anti-magic staff has two effects. The first is the extension effect, which can extend the duration of the anti-magic power of the anti-magic staff after it is activated. The second effect is time reversal, which can play a similar role as a time converter. After the magic forbidden staff is activated, and the magic forbidden power is completely released, it will automatically release time reversal, allowing the magic forbidden staff to return to the time before it was activated, so that it can be used multiple times. Of course, this magic forbidden staff can only use this heaven-defying reversal ability 3 times. That is, after being activated 3 times, this magic forbidden staff will be completely destroyed like an ordinary magic forbidden staff. Even though this treasure has an upper limit on the number of uses, Irina still loves it. You know, Irina's fighting style is no longer limited to the magic wand. Whether it is the little curled winged demon or her poisonous tentacles and Chinese biting cabbage, they are also part of her fighting power. Therefore, even if Irina also sealed her magic power after activating the magic forbidden staff, the Chinese biting cabbage and the little curled winged demon that she released without magic power can still help her kill the enemies whose magic power has been sealed. After happily putting away the improved version of the anti-magic scepter, Irina opened the Christmas gift Newt gave her. There was a tent in a 2-meter long gift box. The tent looked ordinary, but Irina knew that, since Newt would give it to her as a Christmas gift, it must not be as ordinary as it looked. Sure enough, under the tent, Irina saw a letter from Newt. "Merry Christmas, Irina. This is the magic tent I gave you. When you set it up, you will find that there is a big villa inside the tent. Yes, it is exactly the same villa you visited when you came to my house during the holiday. How about it? Surprise." After reading the letter, Irina couldn't help but smile. This magic tent really surprised her. Although Lin had already built a huge villa for her in a suitcase, she couldn't just get into her suitcase in front of others, right? Exclamation mark. With such a magic tent, Irina can have a place to rest in any wilderness, even if there are outsiders present. Irina rubbed her hands and started to set up the tent. With the help of the levitation spell, the magic tent was set up in less than a minute. Irina excitedly lifted the curtain of the tent and saw that the huge living room that appeared in the tent was exactly the same as Newt's house, and at the end of the living room there was a staircase leading to the second floor. The scene in the tent was completely inconsistent with the size of the tent. This magic tent is somewhat similar to the magic tent that Harry and the Weasley family lived in when they went to watch the Quidditch World Cup in the original book, but this magic tent is much more luxurious than the magic tent used by the Weasley family. After unpacking the Christmas gifts, Lin and Irina left their room and prepared to go to the first floor for breakfast. "Good morning, Lin and Irina. By the way, thank you for your gifts. I like them very much." When Lin and Irina arrived in the living room, Irving was already enjoying breakfast. After seeing the two of them arrive almost at the same time, Irving smiled at them and said happily, "The Christmas gift that Lin En gave Irving was also a magic forbidden wand with an instruction manual, but this magic forbidden wand was the original one, unlike Irina's which was improved. But even so, this magic forbidden wand is a precious treasure even in the entire magic world. As for the gift that Irina gave Irving, it was a bottle of curled winged demon venom, a bottle of 8-eyed giant spider venom, and a bottle of mandrake juice. Among them, the venom of the curled winged demon was obtained by Irina from the little curled winged demon in exchange for a pound of sheep brain, and the venom of the 8-eyed giant spider was taken by Lin En and Irina when they were killing in the Forbidden Forest. As for the mandrake juice, it was taken by Irina when she took a single leaf of mandrake from the third greenhouse. All three materials are precious magic materials, especially the venom of the winged demon, which is extremely expensive in the entire magic world. Moreover, the venom of the winged demon and the acromantula can not only be used as potion materials, but they are also very useful weapons in battle. You're welcome, I win. Those two ancient magic books are the biggest Christmas gifts in the world for Irina and me. Compared with these two ancient magic books, our gifts are nothing. Lin En said. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 217, The Terrifying Purgatory Demon Puppet. After breakfast, Lin and Irina wanted to greet Mr. Farley, but Iwin told them that Mr. Farley had left Farley Manor more than an hour ago, so they had to give up, and asked Iwin for a place to practice magic. Unlike the training ground that Lin built behind the Roll Castle, the 4th floor of Farley Castle itself is a place dedicated to practicing magic and combat training. When Lin and Irina arrived at the 4th floor, they found that it seemed to be cast with a powerful traceless stretching spell. The area of this floor was comparable to the small world in Newt's suitcase. This is the training ground of Farley Castle. This ground has the function of self-repairing. You can do whatever you want here, Iwin said to the two with a smile. In fact, although this ground can self-repair, a flame like the Fiendfy that can devour everything can completely destroy this ground. After all, the speed at which the ground is destroyed by the Fiendfy is much faster than the speed at which the ground can self-repair. Otherwise, a place like the Room of Requirement in Hogwarts Castle would not have been destroyed by an out-of-control Fiendfire in the original book. But Iwin did not remind the two. In his opinion, with Lin's powerful control of fire, even if the Fiendfire raged throughout the training ground, Lin might have the ability to extinguish it in an instant. After bringing Lin and Irina to the training ground, Iwin himself found a corner in the training ground, summoned a few training dummies through the castle's own magic, and began to practice his magic. Seeing this, Lin and Irina looked at each other, and the two also found a place to practice the ancient magic they had just come into contact with yesterday. In this training ground with an area comparable to Newt's small world in the box, let alone Lin, Irina and Iwin, even if a whole classroom of little wizards in Hogwarts Castle came, I'm afraid they wouldn't be able to fill up the training ground. Just like that, 3 days passed in a flash. During these 3 days of practice, the three of them made great progress in the fields they practiced. Lin En was seen chanting a profound and obscure spell softly. The next moment, the temperature around Lin En seemed to drop by more than 10 degrees in an instant, and a ray of magic power with a flashing grey light appeared at the top of Lin En's magic wand. This strange grey magic power seemed to come from the god of death, giving people a sense of death, and the power that made people feel depressed also continued to escape from this ray of grey magic power. Lin En's movements did not stop. As a thought came to his mind, a ball of red flame appeared in front of him. This ball of flame seemed to be madly compressed towards the middle by a huge force. Soon, the flame that was originally the size of a small house was compressed to the size of a desk. Lin En raised his left hand slightly, and this ball of magic flame that was compressed to the extreme instantly twisted and changed into a human form. This was a body with healthy limbs, and made entirely of flames, but its face was blank, and had no facial features. Seeing this, Lin En shook his right hand holding the magic wand lightly, and the magic power from hell was thrown into the humanoid body made of flames. With a burst of sizzling sound, this body seemed to be injected with soul, and stood up on its own. The magic power from hell quickly spread to the whole body of the flame body, and this body also changed in various ways as the magic power of hell spread. A black mask appeared on this face without facial features. The mask looked like the face of an evil ghost. The flame body wearing the mask gave people a feeling of being fierce and evil. Not only that, a set of black armor, a black cloak and an unformed weapon in the form of black mist condensed in the hand of the flame body also appeared on this flame body. Looking at the black mist in the hand of the flame body, Lin En thought for a while and tapped it with the magic wand. The black mist quickly transformed into a black broadsword covered with red lines, which was held tightly in the hand of the flame body. After the flame body had its own weapon, it seemed to have been completely completed. Two balls of dark blue flame suddenly ignited in its empty eye sockets, giving people a sense of devouring the soul through the black mask. At this point, the purgatory demon puppet can be said to have been completed. The purgatory demon puppet held a broadsword and stood in front of Lin En. Its dark blue eyes made it look particularly cold, but as its master, Lin En could feel the closeness and loyalty it conveyed from it. Looking at his proud work, Lin En smiled with satisfaction. He waved his wand again, and a wooden board on the ground was transformed into a solid steel block the size of a refrigerator by transfiguration. Chop it. Lin En gave orders to the purgatory demon puppet indifferently, just like the creator. The purgatory demon puppet carried out Lin En's order without hesitation. It swung the big knife in its hand and chopped at the steel block. The big knife in the purgatory demon puppet's hand was burning with red flames. The fierce high temperature burned and twisted the surrounding air. The black big knife covered with red lines seemed to turn into a flame with a blade shape and chopped at the steel block that Lin En had transformed with the transfiguration technique with the momentum of cutting off everything. Under the intense high temperature, the steel block was constantly melted under the fierce chopping of the flaming big knife. In less than a second, the steel block was split into two, and at the cut of the steel block that was cut in half, Lin En could still see the white mist of water vapor condensing, and the steel water flowing on the steel. Not to mention the wizard. Even if the future warrior stood here, I'm afraid that he would be split in half by the purgatory demon puppet. Show your defensive posture. Lin En ordered the purgatory demon puppet lightly. As Lin En finished speaking, the blue flames in the eyes of the purgatory demon puppet flashed, and it immediately retreated half a step, holding the big knife in its hand across its body. Then, the red magic flames, that were also compressed to the extreme, turned into a circular magic circle to block the purgatory demon puppet. Bang, bang, bang. Lin En pulled out the desert eagle from his pocket without hesitation and fired 3 shots at the purgatory demon puppet. However, these 3 bullets could not penetrate the flame barrier created by the purgatory demon puppet at all, and were melted into molten iron by the high temperature. Chapter 218. We have plenty of time. Cancel the defensive posture. Lin En ordered again. The purgatory demon stood up straight, and the flame barrier disappeared. Bang, bang, bang. Lin En raised the desert eagle and fired 3 shots again. However, these 3 bullets were the same as before. After entering the body of the purgatory demon, they were melted into molten iron by the flames that were compressed to the extreme. It was not only the flame barrier used by the purgatory demon for defense, but the purgatory demon itself was also made of flames that were compressed to the extreme. The real function of the previous flame barrier might be to resist the attack of the spell. Thinking of this, Lin En did not intend to continue to test the purgatory demon with the weapons of the muggles. After all, whether it was swords, guns, sticks, or various firearms, they were all made of metal, and metals with high melting points would be instantly melted when facing the flames of the purgatory demon. In this case, it was meaningless to continue to test the purgatory demon with the weapons of the muggles. So, Lin En put away the desert eagle and pulled out his wand with his backhand. Thunder explosion. Lin En shouted, and a beam of orange-red light broke through the air, causing a violent explosion. After hitting the chest of the purgatory demon golem, the airwave generated by the explosion swept the soil of more than 10 meters around, and the breath of destruction spread. However, under the bombardment of such a powerful explosion spell, the purgatory demon golem only retreated a few steps, and a large number of sparks exploded on its body. It seemed that it did not suffer any actual damage. God's Edge without shadow. Lin En waved his wand again, and this time he used the God's Edge without shadow spell, which contained the power of curse, and was extremely lethal. The invisible blade cut out, and a ball of sparks exploded on the chest of the purgatory demon golem, and a large amount of magma flowed down from the chest of the purgatory demon golem. However, the curse that would have made the wound never healed actually lost its original effect when facing a magical creature like the Purgatory Demon Golem. As the flames burned on the chest of the Purgatory Demon Golem, the wound cut by the god's edge without shadow gradually healed. Seeing this, Lin En also had a good idea of the magic resistance of the Purgatory Demon Golem, and then he only needed to try the last magic to test the soul resistance of the Purgatory Demon Golem. Avada Kedavra. A whisper like the ninth overworld sounded, and a beam of light flashing with a faint green light shot out from the top of Lin En's wand. This faint green beam carried endless death and hit the head of the Purgatory Demon Golem fiercely. You know, the Kedavra curse is a death curse against the enemy's soul. It can wipe out the soul of all those hit, and make them die immediately. People killed by the Avada Kedavra curse will not have any wounds on their bodies, as if they have entered a peaceful sleep, because the Avada Kedavra curse kills the soul, not the body. However, after this faint green light hit the Purgatory Demon Golem, the Purgatory Demon Golem still only took a few steps back. The faint blue soul flame in its empty eye sockets dimmed for a moment, but immediately returned to its original state. The blue soul flame was beating weakly, as if expressing doubt. After seeing this scene, Lin En's face showed surprise. The Purgatory Demon Golem is a magical creation with a soul, but the Avada Kedavra curse cannot kill the soul of the Purgatory Demon Golem. This may be because the soul of the Purgatory Demon Golem comes from that special magic power from hell. Lin En thought so. Irina, can you help me? At this time, Lin En cast his eyes on Irina, who was practicing the ice god, and said loudly. Hearing this, Irina, who was about to start trying to transform magic power into ice power, hurried over and looked at Lin En with an inquiring look. Lin En said, Irina, help me use your magic to forcibly extinguish this Purgatory Demon Golem. Lin En himself has a very high affinity for fire. If Lin En tests the magic power needed to extinguish the Purgatory Demon Golem by himself, he will not get the answer he wants, so he can only ask Irina for help. Irina nodded slightly, raised her wand, and chanted, Ice Field. Before Irina converted her own magic power into ice power, and released the Ice Phantom, the ice field was already the best deduction result of the freezing spell. If you want to extinguish the flame, then extremely low temperature is naturally the most labor-saving method. After realizing Irina's murderous intention towards him, the Purgatory Demon Golem instinctively wanted to resist, but Lin En's thought made it stay in place, unable to resist Irina's attack. A large amount of frost fell on the Purgatory Demon Golem, and endless ice kept falling. The area within a radius of 10 meters with the Purgatory Demon Golem as the center almost turned into a snowy area. But even in this case, the Purgatory Demon Golem was not extinguished immediately, but the flickering flames on its body gradually dimmed. After nearly 5 minutes, the dark blue flames in the Purgatory Demon Golem's empty eye sockets were completely extinguished, and the jumping flames on the Purgatory Demon Golem also dissipated, leaving only the black armor. This means the death of the Purgatory Demon Golem. How is it? How much magic power has been consumed? Lin En asked. Irina sat on the ground with her buttocks, and she said weakly, almost all my magic power has been exhausted. The magic power written in your book is 100 times that of the Purgatory Demon Golem is really not a lie. During these 3 days, the two of them also looked at each other's books on ancient magic out of curiosity, so they were clear about the effects of the ancient magic that the other party was about to learn. I understand. Lin En looked thoughtfully at the remains of the Purgatory Demon Golem, which was only a set of black armor, and nodded slightly. It seems that this Purgatory Demon Golem has been successfully made. In other words, he has officially learned this ancient magic. Lin En turned around and looked at Irina, who was sitting weakly on the ground. He knelt on one knee, took out a bottle of magic potion with light blue liquid from his pocket, and handed it to Irina. This is a magic potion that can accelerate the recovery of your magic power. Drink it, Lin En said with some apology. In order to help Lin En test the strength of the Purgatory Demon Golem, Irina exhausted her own magic power so that she could not continue her attempt at the ice god, which made Lin En feel a little guilty about it. Irina drank the magic potion handed over by Lin En. She smiled at Lin En and said, I'm fine. I can continue to practice my ice god after a rest. Don't worry, we always have plenty of time. Please reward a monthly ticket. Chapter 219, The Immortal Puppet, An Existence Above the Dementors. After saying that, Irina planned to sit in meditation to recover her magic power. Although wizards are not like so-called cultivators who can restore their magic power by practicing some kind of cultivation method, compared with jumping around and running around, sitting in meditation on the spot and experiencing the magic power around them can still restore magic power at a higher rate. Seeing this, Lin En was relieved a little, and he shifted his attention back to the purgatory demon puppet. After successfully making the purgatory demon puppet with the magic flame released by the fire spell, Lin En planned to test the other 3 kinds of flames he mastered: the fiery fire, the goblet fairy fire, and the forbidden magic fire. Fiery fire! Lin En shouted softly, and a ball of red and black flame suddenly ignited in his palm. According to the previous method of making the purgatory demon puppet, Lin En made the fiery fire version of the purgatory demon puppet in the same way, and this time during the production process, when Lin En integrated the special magic power from hell into the body of the purgatory demon puppet, it was much smoother than the previous time. This may be because the fierce fire has similar properties to the special magic power from hell. After refining a purgatory demon golem, Lin En looked at this new purgatory demon golem. Compared with the purgatory demon golem he made with magic fire before, this purgatory demon golem looks darker overall, and waves of killing intent and all-consuming aura are constantly released from the body of this purgatory demon golem. Lin En looked at this purgatory demon golem thoughtfully, and suddenly said, "Thunder explosion." An orange-red beam of light broke through the air, but when this explosion spell hit the chest of the purgatory demon golem, the imagined explosion did not occur. This orange-red beam was like a stone sinking into the sea, and was directly swallowed by the body of the purgatory demon golem. Not only that, after this purgatory demon golem swallowed Lin En's explosion spell, the light flashing on its body became even more dazzling. Seeing this scene, Lin En couldn't help but brighten his eyes. This purgatory demon golem transformed by the fierce fire actually possesses the ability to swallow magic spells to strengthen itself. It is like a fierce fire in the form of a warrior, able to devour everything in the world. In this case, if other wizards want to forcibly extinguish this purgatory demon golem made by the fierce fire, they may not be able to suppress it with magic power, otherwise it will even be absorbed by the purgatory demon golem as their own power. Perhaps, only the 10,000 spells ending spell, which is powerful enough, and injected with 100 times the magic power of the purgatory demon golem, can forcibly extinguish it. Lin En thought so. Looking at the purgatory demon golem in front of him, Lin En was reluctant to extinguish it. He took out a metal cube from his pocket. This metal cube has a similar principle to Irina's suitcase, but the space inside it is not a world, but just a metal space with a side length of 10 meters that is similar to the appearance of the metal cube. This space can be used to store any inanimate objects, and it is really suitable to use it to store purgatory demon golems. As Lin En injected magic power into the metal cube lit up with a silver light, and a 2-meter diameter entrance appeared in front of the metal cube. Lin En ordered the purgatory demon golem to walk into the entrance and actively drill into the inner space of the metal cube, and then Lin En put the metal cube back. After the Lihuo version of the purgatory demon golem, Lin En tried the goblet fairy fire version of the purgatory demon golem. Unlike the purgatory demon golem made with Lihuo, when Lin En made the purgatory demon golem with goblet fairy fire, after injecting a special magic power from hell, Lin En actually felt a repulsive force from the body of the purgatory demon golem. Obviously, goblet fairy fire and that special magic power from hell have completely different properties. This repulsive force is not strong, and Lin En suppressed it through his absolute control over goblet fairy fire. Soon, a purgatory demon golem shining with a brilliant golden light appeared in front of Lin En. This purgatory demon golem, which was wearing the dark armor of Satan from hell, and flashing the golden red sacred flame of a 6-winged angel from heaven, gave people a strange sense of contrast. After some tests, including pulling Iwin, who was practicing magic not far away, to help extinguish the purgatory demon golem, Lin En learned the characteristics of this purgatory demon golem. That is the eternal fire, which will never go out. Even if Iwin exhausted all his magic power, and even pulled Mr. Furley, who was drinking tea downstairs, to exhaust all his magic power, the father and son could not dim the flame burning on this purgatory demon golem made of goblet fairy fire. However, this purgatory demon golem also has its own weaknesses. That is, its power is not as high as the goblet fairy fire that Lin En summoned alone, and its temperature is much lower than that of ordinary magic flames. But even so, this purgatory demon golem made of goblet fairy fire is also the most powerful warrior in Lin En's mind. After all, it is the only immortal existence among all kinds of fire-made purgatory demon golems. It is even more powerful than dementors. Even the equally immortal dementors will be restrained by the patroness charm, but the purgatory demon golem made of goblet fairy fire has no natural enemies. In this case, it is no big deal for Lin En to be weaker. Lin En finally tried his own forbidden magic fire, but when he tried to make purgatory demon golem with forbidden magic fire, Lin En encountered difficulties. Forbidden magic fire itself is a flame made by Lin En by combining magic flame with alchemy. It contains powerful power and the power of forbidden magic. Lin En cannot compress it without destroying its original structure and decomposing it into magic flame and all chemical power. And the flame that cannot be compressed to the extreme cannot be used as the material for refining purgatory demon golem. Lin En tried to compress the forbidden magic fire in his body many times, but all ended in failure. Perhaps when his magic power reserves increase and magic power strength improves in the future, he will be able to compress the forbidden magic fire, but he is undoubtedly unable to accomplish this now. Therefore, Lin En had to give up using the forbidden magic fire to make the purgatory magic golem, and he began to repeat the process of using the goblet fairy fire to make the purgatory magic golem. As a purgatory magic golem that can burn forever, even if Lin En stores it forever in the space inside the metal block, the magic power contained in it will not be lost. If Lin En wants to accumulate his strength in advance and have more capital in battle, then the purgatory magic golem made with goblet fairy fire as raw material is undoubtedly the best choice. Chapter 220, Ice Armor and Backup Energy. In the end, Lin En made 10 goblet fairy fire version of the purgatory demon golem and 5 Lihuo version of the purgatory demon golem. As for the purgatory demon golem made of ordinary magic flames as raw materials, Lin En did not continue to make them. While Lin En was making new purgatory demon golems, Irina also recovered her own magic power and began to try to transform her magic power into ice power according to the root of the ice phantom god. Irina chanted obscure syllables in her mouth, and the temperature around her was dropping sharply. The area of more than 10 meters around her was as cold as an ice cave. Wisps of magic power wandered in Irina's body along a specific route, and the obscure syllables affected the extreme cold outside and completed the intersection with these strands of magic power. Under the influence of the extreme cold outside, these strands of originally colorless magic power gradually transformed into an ice blue luster. Soon, those magic powers disappeared in Irina's meridians and were replaced by strands of ice power that exuded a cold breath. At this moment, the power of ice spread all over Irina's body. If someone touches Irina's body, that person will certainly find that Irina's body temperature is even colder than a corpse that has been frozen for decades. Although Irina has a very high affinity for ice element and will not be harmed by ice, the cold that can almost freeze everything makes Irina's skin hard. At this moment, the obscure syllables chanted by Irina seemed to become excited, and the wisps of ice power that spread all over Irina's body seemed to be bound by some special power, and were driven together in the direction of Irina's lower abdomen. At the same time, the magic power originally stored in Irina's lower abdomen expanded towards the surroundings, and the magic power compressed into a magic barrier, isolating an area in it. And the ice power, driven by that special power, entered this isolated area and became Irina's backup energy. Now, Lin En has the magic crystals in the forbidden magic fire and the magic power of the demon god as backup energy, and Irina also has the ice power, which belongs to her own backup energy. When the magic levels of both wizards are equal, the magic reserves of both sides are the key factors in the battle, and the existence of backup energy undoubtedly greatly increases the possibility of Lin En and Irina's victory in actual combat. At this time, in addition to the magic power that turned into a magic barrier, all of Irina's magic power has been converted into her own ice power, and when the ice power is full, her body is still constantly recovering magic power. Obviously, the magic power is exhausted like before, but Irina is not as weak as before after extinguishing the purgatory demon golem. That is because the existence of the backup energy allows Irina to draw ice power at any time to recover herself, and she will not completely lose the ability to resist. After completing the step of converting magic power into ice power, Irina began to excitedly try the methods of using ice power recorded in the book. Ice armor. Irina shouted in a low voice, and a large amount of ice power overflowed from her skin and condensed into thick ice armor on the surface of her body. Each piece of ice on the armor was a foot thick, but the heavy armor seemed to weigh nothing on Irina and did not affect Irina's flexible movements at all. Irina looked at the ice armor on her body curiously. When she subconsciously called out the name of the move just now, she found that, when she read out the name of the move, even if it was a name she created herself, she could mobilize the ice power much faster. This was something she had never felt, since she completely mastered the silent and wandless casting. After all, she had completely mastered the silent and wandless casting of the freezing spell, and the power of silent and wandless casting and normal casting of the freezing spell was equal. Now, when Irina cast the Ice God, she could clearly feel the acceleration of the operation speed of the ice power and the increase of the power of the moves by reciting the names when using the moves. Could this ancient magic called Ice God be created by some middle school patient? Exclamation mark. Irina thought so. If she had to shout out the names of the moves every time she fought, wouldn't it be too embarrassing? Exclamation mark. She managed to avoid the embarrassing situation of this kind of spell confrontation by casting silently. Lin En, come and help me test my ice armor. After casting the ice armor, Irina wanted to test its defensive effect. She looked at Lin En, who had already made all the purgatory demon puppets, and put them into the metal cube, with expectation. Hearing this, Lin En nodded slightly and walked over. Irina said, Lin, try them one by one with firearms, ordinary magic, black magic, and alchemy. Lin agreed, and he took out the Desert Eagle from his pocket again, and fired 3 shots at Irina's chest covered with ice. There is no doubt that the 3 bullets were bounced off by the hard ice, and they didn't even leave a scratch on the surface of the ice armor. Disarm you. Thunder explosion. Lin waved his wand, and a disarming spell and an explosion spell flew towards Irina one after another. The red beam was refracted and flew to the side after hitting the ice condensed on the surface of Irina's body. The explosion spell exploded after hitting Irina, but the terrifying explosion and violent air wave could not make Irina, who was protected by the ice armor, retreat half a step. You know, under the protection of the ice armor, Irina was armed to the teeth. Even Irina's pretty face was covered with a translucent veil of ice that could resist physical and magical attacks. God of Swords. Lin En tried the black magic. As soon as he raised his hand, an invisible blade broke through the air and rushed towards Irina. The power of this God of Swords was indeed impressive. It was also the only spell that Lin En had used so far. A 2-inch deep crack appeared on the surface of the ice armor on Irina's chest. The power of the curse was constantly trying to expand in the crack, but it was suppressed by the powerful ice power. After feeling the remaining curse of God of Swords in front of her, Irina had a rough idea of the defensive ability of the ice armor. When the ice armor was released, only those powerful elite auras could possibly cause harm to her. As for ordinary auras, even if she was allowed to stand motionless among hundreds of ordinary auras wearing the ice armor, I'm afraid those auras would not be able to do anything to her. Of course, this may be a bit exaggerated. Just like Lin En's purgatory demon puppet, if the opponent is willing to use magic power 100 times that of Irina to forcibly melt the ice armor, then Irina will be helpless. Chapter 221 Let Her Go. After testing the black magic, Lin En planned to use the alchemy array to test Irina's ice armor's ability to withstand the full range of magic attacks. Lin En once again replaced the magic crystal for the magic power on his arm, and then with the waving of Lin En's hands, the golden threads in the sky intertwined into 3 alchemy arrays shining with golden light. Strong golden light flashed on the 3 alchemy arrays, which was a sign that the 3 alchemy arrays had completed the accumulation of power. I'm going to start, Lin En said. Irina nodded slightly, and she released a part of the ice power again. While repairing the cracks caused by the previous Shen Feng Wuing, she was ready to repair the ice armor damaged by alchemy at any time. Seeing this, Lin En pressed down his magic wand slightly, and the 3 alchemy arrays simultaneously shot out beams of light at Irina. Under Lin En's control, The 3 alchemy arrays were located in 3 directions of Irina and shot golden beams at Irina from 3 different angles. A large number of golden beams bombarded Irina's ice armor, and countless ice fragments splashed. Each of these golden beams, which were as powerful as a cutting spell, kept leaving traces on Irina's ice armor. Although the damage caused by each golden beam to Irina's ice armor was better than nothing, it was no longer so easy to resist the nearly 100 golden beams bombarding Irina's ice armor per second. A drop of water can wear away a stone, let alone these golden beams, each of which was more powerful than the previous explosion spell! Exclamation mark. It was only 5 minutes, and Irina called for a stop with a flushed face. Under the fierce shooting of countless golden beams, even though Irina used a large amount of ice power to repair the damaged ice armor, she still couldn't keep up with the speed at which the ice armor was destroyed. Seeing that her ice armor was about to break, and the golden beams were about to bombard her body, Irina had to surrender to Lin En in a hurry. Lin En pulled the wand, and the 3 alchemical arrays instantly dissipated like smoke. He wiped the non-existent sweat on his forehead. Without the magic stone, a compressed magic crystal could only support him to squander magic for 5 minutes. Even if Irina didn't call for a stop, I'm afraid the 3 alchemical arrays he had refined would dissipate one by one. This time I finally understand the despair of those enemies when facing you. The continuous attack of this alchemical array is really powerful, Irina said with lingering fear. It seems that last year at Lockhart's duel club, Lin En didn't just let her go, he simply let her go. Lin En shrugged and said helplessly, this alchemical array can only be used as one of my conventional means now. In a real battlefield, it may only be a deterrent to enemies with weaker magic levels than me, or equal to me. Its attack is just a tickle to powerful enemies. Hearing this, Irina nodded in agreement. If Irina were to go back to 2 years ago and use the ice armor to resist the attacks of the alchemical floating cannons that Nico Flamel gave to Lin, I'm afraid Irina would stand still and let Lin shoot at her with the alchemical floating cannons for hours 2 years ago, and her ice armor would not be damaged at all. After fully testing the performance of the ice armor, Irina no longer used the power of ice to repair the damaged ice armor, but decomposed the ice armor into the initial ice power. She began to try other ways to use the ice power, such as condensing the ice power on the surface of her body and using the power of ice to quickly complete the sprint. After triggering the special magic in this training ground and summoning 3 training dummies standing in the same straight line, Irina began to practice the ice power. Irina's body seemed to turn into an ice blue beam with a diameter of nearly 2 meters. In a short moment, it penetrated the bodies of the 3 training dummies one after another and appeared dozens of meters away. The 3 training dummies that were previously pierced by Irina's ice blue beams were transformed into ice sculptures, standing still and unable to move. Success! Irina's eyes flashed with joy. In the next few hours, Irina tried to transform the power of ice into weapons such as bows and arrows, long swords, and ice foxes, ice and snow statues, and other forms of summons that could be controlled by Irina. At the end of the attempt, Irina condensed a stream of ice power into a long sword in her hand, and then planned to gather more ice power on the blade of this ice sword and burst it out in the form of sword energy. Irina suddenly swung the ice sword in her hand, and a sword energy like ice mist broke through the air and instantly slashed dozens of meters away. The places where the sword energy had passed before were all covered by ice mist, as if it had turned into a wall of ice mist, isolating the 2 sides of the place where the sword energy passed. Irina triggered the magic of the training ground again, summoning 2 training dummies that could move on their own and avoid spells, and turned their heads towards the ice fog wall. Irina watched the 2 training dummies stupidly rush into the ice fog. The bodies of the 2 training dummies froze almost the moment they came into contact with the ice fog, turning into 2 ice sculptures. Is this the power of ice power? Exclamation mark. It's really powerful. Irina was very happy. This ice phantom god added a lot to her combat power. But, Irina looked at the ice sword in her hand. Although this ice sword was also condensed by ice power, it should be easier to serve as a bridge connecting the ice power in Irina's body with the outside world. But in fact, since this ice sword was condensed by ice power, it determined that its own carrying capacity was limited, which made it unable to accommodate more ice power and emit it like a real magic weapon. If the ice sword in Irina's hand was replaced with the Gryffindor Holy Sword, the sword energy that Irina just swung out could probably spread to 100 meters away, and even the ice fog wall formed by the ice fog could be extended to 100 meters. Thinking of this, Irina looked at Lin En beside her with expectation, and she said in a pleading tone, "Lin En, can you help me refine a melee weapon? It doesn't need to be very sharp, as long as it can contain as much ice power as possible." Seeing the strangeness of the ice sword in Irina's hand, Lin En naturally understood her idea. Lin En nodded gently and agreed. "Okay, what kind of melee weapon do you want?" Chapter 222 Return to the Scandinavian Mountains. Irina pondered for a while, gestured at her body, and murmured, "Well, I think a long sword or a long spear would be more suitable for me. Although a dagger-like melee weapon combined with my move of using the power of ice to sprint will have unexpected effects. An inch longer is an inch stronger. I would still prefer a longer melee weapon." In fact, Irina had one more thing she didn't say, that is, her melee weapon is not only a weapon that can be used to kill the enemy directly, but also a magic wand in the form of melee weapon that can be used specifically to release the power of ice. In this case, a long sword or a long spear is obviously more suitable to be used as an alternative magic wand. If you look at the length of the melee weapon, I think the long spear may be longer, and its shape is also similar to a scepter, which can be used as a medium to release your ice power. Lin En analyzed. Hearing Lin En's analysis, Irina's eyes lit up, and she nodded without hesitation. "Okay, then let's make a spear. Thank you for your help." Lin En smiled and said, "No trouble. If you don't mind the raw materials, I can even give you the refined spear tomorrow. However, instead of perfunctorily doing it, I would rather give you an excellent weapon. I think the magic wood used in your wand will be a great material." Irina was stunned and said, "Are you talking about the ice crystal wood? But I found that magic tree in Scandinavia in the northwest corner of Europe, which is not in the UK." Lin En smiled and said, "Scandinavia, right? I will apply for a cross-border portkey for us in the capacity of my mother, the current head of the royal family. I estimate that it can be obtained within 2 days. The Christmas holiday lasts for a week. Today is the 4th day. If Lin En can apply for a cross-border portkey within 2 days, then they can go to Scandinavia on the 6th day to find the ice crystal tree." Under the guidance of Irina, who had been to the Scandinavian mountains once, it would naturally take less than a day for Lin and Irina to find the ice crystal tree, and their ideal situation was to go there and come back on the same day. Therefore, they should be able to return to Hogwarts Castle on the last day of the Christmas holiday. Thinking of this, Irina agreed with Lin's idea. So, Lin wrote a letter to his mother Rowena that day, hoping that she would help him, and Irina apply for a cross-border door key. Faced with the child's request, Rowena agreed without any hesitation. Rowena herself is a strong woman. After Henry's death, she took charge of the family business, so she must be very efficient in doing things. Lin sent the letter to Rowena in the afternoon, and Rowena replied to Lin in the evening. She told Lin in the letter that she had applied for the cross-border door key for Lin and Irina, and the activation time of the cross-border door key was tomorrow morning. It was a whole day earlier than expected, which made Lin En and Irina feel a little happy. Since the two of them had learned the 2 ancient magics of Purgatory Demon Golem and Ice Phantom respectively, they returned the 2 books to Mr. Farley after copying the non-spell text in the books. They also said goodbye to Iwin and Mr. Farley the next day and left Farley Manor. The location where the cross-border portkey was placed was not far from Farley Manor. After Lin En and Irina cast the acceleration spell on themselves, it took only more than 20 minutes to reach the location of the cross-border portkey. Perhaps the taste of those guys in the Ministry of Magic has improved. This time, the appearance of the cross-border portkey is no longer a smelly boot or a torn sock, but a plain wooden ring. Feeling the concentration of magic power around them becoming more and more dense, Lin En and Irina quickly put a finger on the wooden ring. With a flash of white light, the 2 bodies twisted and disappeared on the spot, and in the next moment, they had arrived at the Scandinavian peninsula. When Lin En and Irina were brought here by the cross-border portkey, they immediately adjusted their center of gravity, stood firm, and then scanned the surrounding environment. "This is the foot of the Scandinavian mountains, not far from where we are going," Irina said with some surprise. She remembered this place. This was the place where Irina's family had a disagreement when they traveled here a year and a half ago. At that time, her father proposed to hike, while her mother planned to take an off-road vehicle up the mountain. In the end, she cast an acceleration spell on herself and her parents, which peacefully resolved the disagreement and made her parents reach an agreement and complete a pleasant trip. Lin En smiled and looked at her with soft eyes. Since you are familiar with this place, you will lead the way. Irina nodded happily. Although a year and a half had passed, the surrounding environment had not changed much. Even the path she had stepped on when she crossed the jungle before could still be seen with some traces. Before preparing to leave, Irina pulled out her suitcase from a backpack that Lin En had given her before, which was cast with a traceless extension spell, and released Kingv. Kingv stood on Irina's shoulder. She was very excited when she noticed the familiar environment around her. She quickly gestured to Irina with her slender hands. Irina seemed to understand what Kingv wanted to say. She rubbed Kingv's head lovingly and said happily, "Yes, Kingv, we are here to visit your family today. Oh, don't worry, I remember the route." As she said that, Irina took the lead and climbed towards the halfway point of the Scandinavian mountains. The Scandinavian mountains are very large. Although Irina knew the route and both Lin En and Irina cast an acceleration spell on themselves, it was already dusk when they arrived at the strange magic forest where the ice crystal tree was located. Irina led Lin En to quickly go deep into the magic forest. In just over 10 minutes, everything in front of the two of them suddenly became clear, and the ice crystal tree, which was 4 or 5 meters high and exuded cold air, was standing alone in the middle of the open grassland. At this time, the green lady let out a joyful cry, jumped off Irina's shoulder, and ran towards the ice crystal tree. As the green lady's cry rang out in the open grassland, Botrickles popped out from the ice crystal tree, screaming and cheering to welcome the green lady. Many brave Botrickles even jumped in front of Lin En and Irina, curiously looking at Irina, the little witch they had seen before, and who made them feel close, and Lin En, the strange male wizard they met for the first time. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 223, Monopolizing the Ice Crystal Tree and Subduing the Tree Protecting Botrickle Clan. Irina squatted down, took out a large can of earthworms, and distributed them to the little guys in front of her. The Botrickles took the earthworms from Irina one after another, and they cheered with joy. Earthworms, the favorite food of Botrickles, always made them let down most of their guard. Not long after, 3 or 4 Botrickles carefully carried a nearly 2-meter long ice crystal wood branch from under the ice crystal tree. The shape of this ice crystal wood branch was just right for Irina to make a suitable spear. It's really easy to get it. Irina, do you plan to move them all into your suitcase? After Irina took the ice crystal wood branch from the Botrickles, Lin En said to her with a smile. Hearing this, Irina was stunned for a moment and said, I haven't thought about it yet. The main reason is that the little guys may not be willing to leave this place. Lin En chuckled and said, I can transplant the whole tree into your suitcase without harming the tree. In this way, we can be said to have monopolized the only ice crystal tree in the magic world. Don't forget that the ice crystal wood produced by this ice crystal tree can play a very good role in most fields for you who have an affinity for ice element. Irina couldn't help but feel a little moved. She cast her eyes on Kingv, who was holding hands with other tree guarding hunches. She said in a seductive tone, Kingv, ask those little guys if they are willing to live with this ice crystal tree in my suitcase, which is the place where you live. In this way, you can always be together, and you can also avoid all natural enemies. Your safety is guaranteed, and most importantly, you will have plenty of earthworms. As Irina finished speaking, the dozens of tree guarding hunches all cast their eyes on Irina. Although they did not understand human language, they could still roughly understand what Irina meant, who had the gift of affinity with magical animals. After learning that they could live safely and carefree with their companions and ice crystal trees, and that there was an inexhaustible supply of earthworms, these tree guarding hunches all showed signs of being tempted. At this time, Kingv was also chirping in these tree guarding hunches, as if she was telling her companions how wonderful the world in the suitcase was, and how wonderful the more than 100 magical trees suitable for tree guarding hunches were. Not long after, these tree guarding hunches agreed to live in Irina's suitcase with her. I saw these tree guarding hunches running over one after another. They no longer suppressed their feelings of closeness to Irina, but jumped onto Irina's shoulders, arms, and head, rubbing against Irina intimately. Seeing this, Irina smiled. She pulled the suitcase out of the backpack with the traceless extension spell again, opened it, and let King lead a group of Botrickles into the suitcase. With King leading the way, these lovely Botrickles will surely be able to find their own home in the grove. You know, even after these Botrickles joined, there were only a few dozen Botrickles in the small world of Irina's suitcase, while there were hundreds of magical trees in the grove. This means that every Botrickle can have a magical tree of its own here. Such a grove is a paradise for these Botrickles. What's more, there are a large number of captive terrapins at the edge of the grove. Irina believed that, when these Botrickles adapted to the life in the small world in the suitcase, even if she wanted them to return to the Scandinavian mountains, they would not be willing. Please, Lin. After watching all the little guys enter the suitcase, Irina turned her eyes to Lin. Lin nodded slightly, and he hummed something softly. A golden light flew out from the tip of Lin's wand, wrapping the entire ice crystal tree. Then, under the cover of the golden light, the entire ice crystal tree was pulled out of the soil with its roots, and even the tip of the root system did not break. Lin gently shook his wand, and the silent floating spell was released. Under his control, the ice crystal tree flew towards Irina's suitcase. After the ice crystal tree flew into the suitcase, Lin and Irina also got into it one after another. Lin controlled the ice crystal tree to fly to the middle of the magical forest where the tree guarding hunches lived. Looking at the grass around planted with various magical trees, Lin signaled Irina with his eyes. Feeling Lin En's gaze, Irina nodded knowingly, waved her wand, and chanted a spell. The lawn between the two seemed to be expanded by a special force. The lawn that could only accommodate a round table was now as wide as a large classroom. Irina had just cast the untraceable extension spell, and what she did was to add her own untraceable extension spell to the untraceable extension spell that Newt had cast on the suitcase. After Irina extended a piece of open space, Lin En planted the ice crystal tree in the center of the open space, making the layout here as similar as possible to the original layout of the ice crystal trees in the Scandinavian mountains. When the two had done all this, they saw many Botrickles running out of the surrounding magical woods and jumping onto the ice crystal tree, where they had lived for many years. The number of these Botrickles that jumped onto the ice crystal tree was about 1/3 of the Botrickles that had entered the suitcase earlier. It was obvious that the remaining 2/3 of the Botrickles preferred to settle down on other magical trees. Now that everything is done, let's hurry back. I will try to finish refining your spear tomorrow, so that we can return to Hogwarts Castle on time the day after tomorrow, which is the last day of the holiday. Lin En said so. Irina nodded happily. After she settled King and other Botrickles, she followed Lin En out of the suitcase. Rowena applied for a cross-border door key to the Scandinavian peninsula for Lin En, so there was no reason not to apply for a cross-border door key for the return trip. This cross-border door key for the return trip was not far from the place where the two had teleported to before. Since the time spent by Lin En and Irina on this trip was still uncertain, in order to avoid the two missing the cross-border door key for the return trip due to the adventure, this time the cross-border door key was not activated at a fixed time, but was automatically activated after being touched by an external person. This activation method is similar to the tampered goblet of fire in the original book. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 224, Ice Crystal Spear, Irina's special weapon. Lin En and Irina returned to the foot of the mountain much faster than when they came. After all, the so-called easy to climb up the mountain, but difficult to go down the mountain is just because when going down the mountain, people's knees are more likely to be worn out, and going down the mountain too fast is easy to roll down and cause life-threatening. However, as wizards, Lin En and Irina did not have this concern. They could use the levitation spell to let themselves fly directly down the mountain. Of course, this way of floating the whole person also consumes a lot of their own magic power. If Lin En had not the authority of the demon god, to borrow the magic power of the magic crystal, and Irina had the power of ice to help her move quickly. Otherwise the two would never dare to do this. The sun sets and the moon rises. Lin En and Irina hurried and finally arrived at the location of the cross-border door key before midnight. The cross-border door key is in the shape of a cup. After Lin En and Irina put their hands on the cup at the same time, their figures flashed and appeared outside the roll manor in the next moment. Irina, I've left the room you stayed in last time. Rest here tonight, Lin En said. Irina nodded obediently. She had no objection to Lin En's arrangement. So, Irina went to stay in the guest room on the third floor of the roll castle, while Lin En returned to his room and took out the nearly 2-meter long ice crystal wood. Although it was already late, Lin En was still not sleepy. He decided to take advantage of this energy to do some simple rough processing for Irina's spear. Lin En placed the ice crystal wood on the alchemy table in front of him. He raised his left hand, and with a flash of silver light, the mithril carving knife appeared in Lin En's hand. Between the rise and fall of the knife, many useless wood chips and branches were cut off by Lin En from the ice crystal wood. As Lin En's left hand holding the mithril carving knife flipped up and down, the shape of the ice crystal wood gradually approached that of a spear. In less than 5 minutes, the prototype of a spear that looked extremely sharp was formed. However, this was just the beginning for Lin En. If it were Lin En 2 or 3 years ago, he might only add an alchemy array to the ice crystal spear that had already formed a prototype to strengthen its properties. But now that he has a good attainment in alchemy, he will naturally choose to combine more materials that match Irina's properties with this ice crystal spear to form a more powerful material. Lin En wiped his waste bag with his right hand, and 3 materials appeared one by one on the alchemy table in front of Lin En. The first material was a brick-sized piece of ice. This piece of ice is called eternal ice in the magic world. Its status in ice is equivalent to that of Goblet fairy fire in flames. It is a kind of ice that cannot be melted. It is even rarer because it is only born naturally in extremely cold places and cannot be created by wizards, but it is not as expensive as the Goblet fairy fire because it cannot have the same damage as the Goblet fairy fire. It is just a piece of ice that will not melt. Even its temperature is not much lower than that of ordinary ice. Except for the field of magic alchemy, almost no wizard would choose to spend a lot of money to buy this ice that seems to have no effect. And Lin En chose it as a material just to extract its never melt attribute in the magic alchemy and give it to the ice crystal spear. As for the second material, placed on the alchemy table, it is a piece of black iron. The so-called black iron is actually meteorite iron extracted from meteorites. In Lin En's previous life, he had seen such a description of black iron in Jin Yang's The Return of the Condor Heroes. This black iron is extracted from meteorites falling from the sky. It is the most precious treasure in the world. It is extremely difficult to get 1 or 2 teals in ordinary swords, spears, swords, and halberds. As long as half a teal of money is added, ordinary iron can be made into a sharp weapon. In fact, the reason why this meteorite has a special advantage in making sharp weapons is that it contains high and evenly distributed nickel, and nickel is a substance that can improve the sharpness of weapons. Lin En used black iron as the material for refining the ice crystal spear, not to extract a certain property of it, but only to integrate it into the ice crystal wood and improve the quality of the ice crystal spear. As for the last material, it is a piece of forbidden magic stone. Lin En intends to integrate this forbidden magic stone into a small piece of black iron and make it into the spearhead of the ice crystal spear. In this way, the ice crystal spear will have a certain forbidden magic power when attacking, which can catch the enemy who intends to use magic to resist by surprise during the battle, which may have some miraculous effects. After taking out 3 different alchemical materials, Lin En summoned the magic flame and refined the embryo of the ice crystal spear. Since the ice block called eternal ice will not be melted by the flame, Lin En did not hesitate to throw it into the magic flame. After starting the magic alchemy, under the burning of the magic flame, although the ice did not melt, its shape was changing under the influence of the golden light. As time went by, Lin En could see wisps of ice blue smoke escaping from the ice and merging into the ice crystal wood together with the melted black iron. The ice that released the ice blue smoke seemed to have lost the power to support it from being melted and was evaporated by the high temperature in an instant. Half an hour later, a brand new spear embryo appeared on Lin En's alchemy table. This ice crystal spear is made of ice crystal wood and black iron, and it also contains the property of eternal ice that cannot be melted, which allows it to carry more ice power and serve as an excellent medium for releasing ice power. It looks like a spear made of ice blue crystal, and the silver metal on the spearhead makes this ice crystal spear look sharp and majestic. At this point, the magic alchemy of this ice crystal spear has been completed. Lin En looked at the original spear on the alchemy table with satisfaction, then packed up the remaining things and went to bed. The next day, Lin En got up early in the morning to continue refining the ice crystal spear and completed the engraving of all the alchemical arrays at noon. On this ice crystal spear, Lin En engraved all chemical arrays with alchemical runes such as ice, connection, freeze, strengthening, sharp, and poisoning as the main attributes. From a distance, there are nearly 200 alchemical arrays distributed in every corner of the ice crystal spear, and even overlapping each other. Lin En waved his wand and chanted something softly. With the golden light flashing, those alchemical arrays sank into the interior of the ice crystal spear. After completing the refining of the ice crystal spear, Lin En immediately handed it to Irina and asked her to try this ice crystal spear. Please give me rewards and monthly tickets. Chapter 225, The Primordial Ice and the Biting North Wind. Irina happily took the ice crystal spear. As soon as she held it, she felt as if she was in tune with it. The icy power in her body could even be released through it unimpeded. I think you have already felt it. This ice crystal spear has a similar feeling of being in tune with you. If you are willing to drop a drop of blood on the handle of the spear, I think this feeling will be even more obvious. Lin En said to Irina with a smile. Hearing this, Irina asked with interest, is it like the blood recognition in those fantasy novels? Lin En smiled and nodded, saying, almost. I attached an alchemical array that can distinguish between enemies and friends to the ice crystal spear, and used another auxiliary alchemical array to establish its uniqueness. In other words, after the ice crystal spear absorbs the blood of the first wizard, it will only serve this wizard. Others who want to use the ice crystal spear will find that the weight of this ice crystal spear has increased several times, and they cannot inject any magic power into it, as if this ice crystal spear is a piece of forbidden magic stone that isolates magic. Lin En introduced the function of the ice crystal spear to Irina. After listening to Lin En's introduction, Irina's eyes sparkled. She bit her index finger without hesitation and ripped a drop of blood on the handle of the ice crystal spear. A light blue fluorescence spread out, and Irina felt a blood connection between herself and the ice crystal spear, as if the ice crystal spear was a part of her body. Lin En waved his wand lightly, and a silent healing spell was cast, healing the wound on Irina's finger. Let's go to the training ground and try it, Lin En said, and took Irina to the training ground behind the roll castle. In this large field, Lin En waved to Irina, indicating that she should use the ice phantom to attack him. Irina understood, and a stream of ice power was injected into the ice crystal spear with her thoughts. She quickly swung the ice crystal spear and stabbed it towards Lin En's chest. The ice blue ice power turned into a foot-long spear light, spewing out from the tip of the ice crystal spear. Wherever the spear lights wept, even the ground of the training ground, which was applied with hundreds of defensive magic and defensive alchemy arrays, was frozen into ice. Seeing this, Lin En retreated without any hesitation. For now, Lin En still positioned himself as a mage, so facing Irina's melee attack with the ice crystal spear, Lin En naturally focused on dodging. After being dodged, Irina was not relenting. She continued to inject the power of ice into the ice crystal spear, and as she swept the ice crystal spear out, a half-moon shaped ice blue streak of more than 10 meters flew towards Lin En. Lin En raised his left hand, and a ball of black and red flame flew out, cancelling out the ice blue streak. This ball of black and red flame was Lin En's forbidden magic fire. Compared with the fierce fire, the forbidden magic fire was more able to suppress some special energies such as the power of ice, which were powerful in themselves. Shatter into pieces. Lin En raised his wand, and a grey-white cutting spell shot towards Irina. Irina placed the ice crystal spear in her hand across her chest and whispered, "Ice armor." Countless ice condensed on Irina's body in an instant, turning into armor that could resist everything. Even the surface of the ice crystal spear in Irina's hand was condensed with a thin layer of ice. The cutting spell hit the spear body of the ice crystal spear, but was bounced off by the ice covering the spear body and the power of the ice crystal spear itself. Mixed primordial ice, cold north wind. After blocking Lin En's cutting spell, Irina's eyes became sharp, and her whole state seemed to have changed. A low shout filled with cold breath came. Irina's body jumped up, and the tip of the ice crystal spear was aimed at Lin En's head. A large amount of ice power rushed towards Irina's body and the ice crystal spear in her hand. But within a few breaths, Lin En could feel the oppression brought to him by Irina not far away becoming particularly strong. He could even feel the threat to his life from the extremely cold power. Obviously, Irina had completed the charging of this unknown move. At this time, Irina seemed to hesitate for a moment. She turned the gun head and pointed the gun handle at Lin En's chest. Swish. A sound of breaking through the air sounded, as if endless ice and snow were pouring in. Lin En only felt a pain in his chest, and then the extreme cold spread throughout his internal organs with his chest as a center in a short moment. When he regained consciousness, he found himself frozen in an ice sculpture with only a head exposed. Beside him, Irina pressed her hands on the ice sculpture, and tried hard to extract the ice power from it to thaw Lin En. I didn't expect that you, who have both the Ice Phantom God and the Ice Crystal Spear, have the ability to defeat me. Lin En smiled bitterly. Although Irina's sprint with the power of ice was able to penetrate Lin's body smoothly, because Lin was not very prepared for her, it was an indisputable fact that he was defeated by Irina. After all, no one will give you a chance to prepare in a real battlefield. Hearing Lin's words, Irina shook her head in distress and said, in order to defeat you in an instant, I consumed 60% to 70% of my ice power just now, and if you are prepared for this, I may not be able to penetrate your flame protection. She still has a lot to do to surpass this excellent boy in front of her. Irina thought so in her heart. After testing the performance of the ice crystal spear, Irina was very happy to put it in her backpack with the traceless extension spell cast on it. Lin and Irina stayed in the Roll Castle for another day, and took the Hogwarts Express on the next day, to return to Hogwarts Castle. Everyone can see the speed of the Hogwarts Express. The Hogwarts Express departed at noon, but when Lin and Irina arrived at Hogwarts Castle, the stars were already high in the night sky. This was the last day of the Christmas holiday, and considering that Lin and Irina had at least 3 compulsory courses to attend the next day, they did not wander around the castle, but returned to their respective dormitories early to rest. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.